Right now, as you listen to this, the solar system is breathing differently. The night sky looks calm, but instruments across the world are whispering a new pattern, objects multiplying where there should be silence. Ever since astronomers first caught sight of the interstellar wanderer called 3I Atlas, the familiar clockwork of planetary motion has begun to feel slightly off, as if some invisible hand has nudged the rhythm by a fraction of a heartbeat. You can almost feel it in the stillness outside your window tonight, a faint electric awareness in the dark. For months, the data have refused to behave. Clusters of asteroids, swarms of comets, newcomers sliding through orbital lanes that used to be empty, each discovery arriving with unnerving precision, as though answering a signal no one remembers sending. Telescopes that once mapped the quiet corridors between Mars and Jupiter now record a traffic jam of glittering debris. The universe, normally indifferent to coincidence, appears to be staging one. And yet, beneath the mathematical chaos, something elegant glimmers. The trajectories line up in faint spirals that point toward a single destination: Mars. A cold world, yes, but also a mirror of human ambition, a planet we've long imagined as tomorrow's address. As 3I Atlas draws closer, that crimson mirror begins to flicker with mystery. What if these converging objects aren't random at all? What if we're witnessing the choreography of a cosmic process we were never meant to interrupt? Ancient myths once spoke of sky builders and fiery gods shaping worlds with invisible tools. Tonight, those stories feel less like folklore and more like field notes from an older civilization. The instruments of NASA hum in the background, patient and nervous. Somewhere between signal noise and starlight, the equations begin to resemble a question. Are we observing nature or intention? So, before sleep pulls you under, listen carefully. Outside, the heavens are rearranging themselves, one silent object at a time. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are watching from. Somewhere, another listener is doing the same, tracing the same invisible spiral in the dark, because this is only the beginning. The sky is not empty, it is waking up. You start by imagining the sound of nothing. Space, after all, should be silent, yet every astronomer knows it hums in its own way. The hum grows louder in mid-September 2025, when the sky that was supposed to be quiet begins to sparkle with movement. Objects that once slept in the dark suddenly cross the field of vision like restless memories. At first, it seems routine. One asteroid after another logs a safe flyby, numbers scrolling neatly through the databases of NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies. But when the count keeps rising, even the calm voices on midnight duty begin to trade uneasy jokes. You picture them inside observatories, coffee cooling beside keyboards, fingers tapping, eyes fixed on screens that should display ordinary dots, but instead look alive with motion. They name the first intruder 2025 FA 22, a mountain-sized fragment, roughly 200 meters across. It slips past Earth at just over 2 lunar distances, close enough to feel intimate, far enough to call safe. You imagine it glinting in the sun, indifferent to the commotion it causes below. Then comes RJ-2, 3 days earlier, darting past at less than 1 lunar distance, a mere handshake in cosmic terms. Astronomers smile nervously. 1 handshake is curiosity, 2 is coincidence, 3 becomes choreography, because by the week's end, dozens more arrive. Sublunar crossings stack up like notes in a scale, perfectly spaced, perfectly timed. Each line in the catalogue feels rehearsed. You watch the data scroll like music notation. the rhythm of chance transforming into the rhythm of design. They call it the September surge. To the public, it's a headline. To those watching the instruments, it's a whisper that something fundamental has shifted. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile has just gone live. Its first light images capturing thousands of new asteroids in a single night. Official explanations say improved technology simply reveals what was always there. But in quiet corners of mission control, someone mutters what others are thinking. Then why now? Outside the realm of headlines, Comet C2025R2 Swan brightens near Virgo. Its green tail paints a line across the same patch of sky where 3i Atlas will soon appear. Even the comets seem to know their cues. The evening news calls it coincidence. The night shift astronomers call it poetry disguised as math. You lean closer to the thought. If the solar system is a theater, then September 2025 is opening night. Earth plays the audience. The asteroids play the dancers. And somewhere behind the curtain, something unseen conducts the tempo. The choreography becomes more intricate as the weeks pass. A smaller object drifts so close, it slides inside the orbit of the moon, then disappears again into the void. Another fragment silently, leaving a trail of dust that glows faintly in the ultraviolet photographs sent from low Earth orbit. Patterns begin to emerge, 7 primary tracks crossing at a shallow angle near Mars's orbital lane. The geometry feels intentional, a geometry of arrival. At the European Space Agency, algorithms check and recheck their models. Gravitational perturbations explain much, but not all. When statisticians plot the clustering probabilities, the numbers blush into improbability. 1 in 50,000, maybe 1 in a million. Still possible, but only just. The universe does not like to waste odds that small on nothing. In Washington, D.C., the Planetary Defense Office runs simulation after simulation. Screens bloom with crimson arcs, showing hypothetical impacts that never happen. For each safe miss, there's relief, then confusion. Every orbit skims just close enough to draw attention, just far enough to prove benign. The cosmos, it seems, is flirting. Meanwhile, public fascination blooms. Social media fills with time-lapse images of faint streaks crossing the stars. Amateur astronomers trade coordinates, chasing dots that vanish by morning. Someone posts a compilation set to classical music, each asteroid streaking by in rhythm, a ballet of stone and silence. Beneath the beauty, a new unease creeps in, because behind this parade lies the headline no one wants to print. These visitors are not behaving statistically. Their clustering, their alignment, even their discovery sequence suggest orchestration. And every orbital trace, every one subtly curves toward the same gravitational destination, Mars. In the sterile glow of mission control, a scientist jokes that Mars has become the galaxy's new tourist attraction. No one laughs. They simply stare at the screen, where 20 red dots spiral toward that crimson planet, like embers drawn to a distant flame. Outside, the sky remains deceptively peaceful. You can look up right now and see nothing unusual, the same old constellations, the same gentle drift of time. Yet somewhere beyond human sight, the choreography continues, patient and deliberate. And when you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the slow percussion of cosmic stone, the quiet countdown of orbits, converging on a single world. The evidence is building, softly, like music you cannot yet name. You wake again in that hush between midnight and morning, the hour when even technology seems to breathe slower. Across the world, telescopes hum like tuning forks, collecting photons that left their stars before human language existed. And yet, in all that quiet, There is movement, a subtle repetition that refuses to dissolve into randomness. Data analysts see it first. The orbital plots from September do not scatter evenly through probability space. They align, faintly but insistently, along vectors that intersect near the orbit of Mars. It is as if invisible strings are tightening through the inner solar system, drawing debris inward toward a single gravitational cord. No one says the word pattern aloud in the meetings, because patterns mean intention, and intention means panic. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a junior researcher overlays spectra from the recent asteroid pass-bys. She expects ordinary mineral signatures, olivine, nickel iron, hydrated clays. Instead, she finds something that makes her pause. A recurring spike near a wavelength not typical of stony objects at these temperatures. It's faint, buried in noise, but when she averages the files, the signal stabilizes like a heartbeat surfacing through static. Carbon dioxide again. Too much of it. The same anomaly that defines 3I Atlas. She sends the report upstairs. Within hours, it is quietly reclassified for review. Not censored, exactly just delayed, the way scientists sometimes hold their breath before confirming the impossible. By dawn, observatories in Chile and Hawaii are ordered to rescan the passing bodies. The results replicate. Multiple small asteroids showing faint CO2 emission lines, not enough to suggest atmosphere, but enough to whisper connection. Meanwhile, in a low-lit lab outside Geneva, the European Space Agency cross-checks radar albedo readings from object RJ2. It reflects more smoothly than it should, as though its surface were glazed. That same day, an amateur astronomer in Namibia uploads images of a thin, spiral wake trailing behind one of the newcomers. The wake dissipates within hours, but its geometry, a helix tightening towards solar north, ignites discussion threads that fill the night. Some call it artifact, others resonance. A few simply type, "It's listening." The James Webb Space Telescope joins the investigation, pointing its infrared instruments toward the region between Mars and the asteroid belt. What it records is not a single object, but dozens cold, dark shapes against the microwave background, each following a trajectory that seems to echo the last. From our vantage, they drift like dust motes through a beam of ancient light, but their spacing is too consistent, their timing too polite. When the press conference comes, NASA's tone is calm, deliberate, rehearsed. They call the anomalies observational coincidence, amplified by new sensitivity thresholds. They remind the public that correlation is not causation. They remind themselves as well. Yet behind closed doors, the analysts run the numbers again. The chance of so many near-identical spectral quirks appearing within weeks falls below 1 in 100,000. Probability, that stern accountant of the universe, begins to look creative. You picture it as a score forming across the heavens, each asteroid a note, each comet a pause, each data spike a vibration in a greater composition. To human ears, it remains inaudible, but somewhere deep in the electromagnetic background, the universe might be humming to itself, adjusting pitch. A scientist at MIT jokes that the solar system has developed a mild fever. Her students laugh, but she isn't entirely joking. Planetary magnetometers show small, synchronous fluctuations. Nothing catastrophic, just ripples in the solar wind, aligning with the new object's crossings. Space weather stations register them as harmless blips, yet the timing mirrors every recorded pass. Energy is being transferred, though no one can say how. By late October, 3I Atlas itself edges nearer to perihelion. Its green coma blooms like ghost fire against the void. a halo visible even through amateur telescopes. Photometric readings show episodic flare-ups, short bursts of brightness not tied to solar distance. Each burst corresponds, within hours, to subtle magnetic shifts logged by orbiters near Mars. Correlation again, perhaps, but the file name quietly changes from coincidence, log, to synchronization. 1. When you lie awake at night, you think about synchronization, your own heartbeat, the pulse of tides, the way human circadian rhythms once matched lunar cycles before electric light rewired sleep. Maybe the cosmos, too, keeps its own circadian clock slow, ancient, drifting in cycles so long we mistake them for chance. And maybe, just maybe, we have stumbled into one of its waking moments. Out in the desert observatories, dust glows silver beneath floodlights as technicians adjust mirrors. No alarms sound. No governments declare emergency. Only a growing awareness that the solar system is not static. Objects are multiplying, trajectories converging, signals repeating like verses in an old forgotten hymn. You scroll through the headlines. Asteroid cluster puzzles scientists. Unprecedented comet activity continues. 3I Atlas approaching Mars. No threat detected. Each sentence balances reassurance against curiosity, the way a lullaby balances comfort against mystery. And you can't help wondering whether reassurance itself is part of the choreography and necessary quieting before the next crescendo. Somewhere beyond the reach of radar, something shifts again. A small pulse of light reflects off a fragment that wasn't there yesterday. For a fraction of a second, its signal forms a perfect harmonic with the previous readings, like two notes resonating across emptiness. Then it fades. Silence returns, but it doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels expectant. You exhale, realizing you've been holding your breath for the length of the data stream. Even silence, you think, can be a message. And the message, though undeciphered, keeps repeating. The system is awake. The evidence deepens. You lie back and imagine time folding like pages in a book, each orbit of every world layered upon the next. The present sky above you is restless, full of motion and whispering data, but hidden beneath those shifting patterns is an older memory, one written in dust and magnetism. Astronomers have always known that space keeps its diary in craters. Every impact on every world is an entry, a punctuation mark in an otherwise silent chronicle. Tonight, that chronicle seems to be stirring, as if the new activity in the heavens has reminded ancient scars to speak again. On Mars, orbiters mapping the southern highlands detect subtle albedo changes, patches of regolith that glimmer where no recent dust storms have passed. The color shift is faint but consistent, and it spreads along lines that trace the same orbital geometry as the objects now converging on the planet. A coincidence, perhaps, or perhaps something older awakening in sympathy. Planetary geologists compare the data to Viking images from 1976 and find the pattern older than the missions themselves. The Martian surface, it seems, has been waiting for this alignment for decades, maybe longer. Meanwhile, on Earth, buried evidence begins to feel newly relevant. Core samples from Antarctic ice reveal microspherules of nickel and iridium deposited roughly 13,000 years ago. The same era, once blamed for a mysterious planetary cooling. Most scientists attribute it to a fragmented comet impact, a cosmic accident in an age before agriculture. Yet the isotopic ratios in those spheres match the faint, nickel-heavy signature now seen in 3I Atlas. The coincidence tightens. The past, it seems, is looping through the present like an echo across deep time. In a quiet lecture hall at the University of Arizona, an archaeologist who moonlights as an amateur astronomer scrolls through satellite overlays of ancient petroglyphs. Spirals, dots, and branching lines carved into stone by civilizations that vanished millennia ago. One carving from the Atacama Desert shows 7 radiating trails converging on a central disk. To tourists, it is a sunburst. To her, tonight, it looks uncomfortably like a diagram of orbits intersecting at Mars. The old myths called them sky visitors, the makers of fire who descended from the red planet to seed life or judgment. For centuries, those stories were regarded as allegory. Now, as new objects march toward that same world, allegory begins to resemble data. Radio observatories across the globe continue their patient listening. Between the usual solar wind hiss and pulsar clicks, analysts notice transient bursts, broadband murmurs, repeating every 26 hours, roughly the rotational period of Mars. They are not voices, merely structured noise, but structure is enough to provoke insomnia in the scientific mind. Pattern recognition has always been humanity's greatest survival skill and its favorite source of dread. The bursts are logged, labeled non-terrestrial background 3I correlated, and quietly passed along for deeper analysis. The official statement calls them solar interference. The unofficial conversation begins to sound like déjà vu, because this isn't the first time such patterns have surfaced. Old mission archives from the 1990s contain forgotten telemetry from Mars Global Surveyor. Tiny anomalies in magnetic field, readings near the equator, dismissed then as instrument noise. Reprocessed with modern algorithms, they align perfectly with the coordinates of the current albedo changes. It is as if the planet itself has been pulsing at intervals, marking time until something or someone returned. The data suggest a rhythm older than recorded history, a metronome ticking beneath sand and stone. You picture it. Eons of silence broken by brief moments of cosmic percussion, impacts, alignments, migrations of dust, the galaxy itself conducting a symphony of recurrence. Perhaps 3I Atlas isn't introducing chaos to the solar system at all. Perhaps it's restoring tempo, reminding the planets of a forgotten song. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, a linguist turned data scientist overlays those repeating broadband bursts onto historical solar cycles. The harmonics line up not with random noise but with the Schumann resonances of Earth's own atmosphere. 2 worlds humming in compatible frequencies, separated by tens of millions of kilometers. When she presents the finding, her supervisor chuckles and calls it poetic interference. She agrees, but she keeps listening. Back in the Atacama, the archaeologist aims her small telescope at Mars just before dawn. The planet gleams steady and rust-colored, framed by the ghost green coma of 3I Atlas lower in the sky. She whispers the names carved on the stones, ancient syllables for gods of metal, fire, and return. The wind carries the sound across the desert, and for a moment, the distinction between myth and measurement blurs. Maybe the ancients weren't recording fantasies. Maybe they were recording previous passes of the same celestial visitor. Every 4,000 years, perhaps, the galaxy sends a reminder. In laboratories from Pasadena to Paris, computers simulate backward orbits. When they trace the projected path of 3I Atlas through galactic coordinates, the line threads through epochs when Earth's skies recorded unusual meteor storms, ice core spikes, and inexplicable climate shifts. The alignment doesn't prove causation, but it hums with possibility. A visitor older than civilization, recurring on schedules too vast for folklore to capture, may have shaped chapters of human origin. You can almost feel that realization settling through the species like a long exhale. The same atoms that once reigned from passing debris may now reside in our bones. We are, quite literally, the sediment of previous encounters. The dust that writes our myths may have been the dust of Atlas itself. By early November, public fascination outpaces official caution. Documentaries appear overnight. Headlines read, "Ancient Echoes on Mars," and "Is History Repeating Across the Stars?" Scientists frown, but secretly they, too, feel the resonance. The more the data unfold, the more the universe seems to be quoting itself. And you, listening in the dark, begin to sense why sleep feels different now. The night carries undertones of memory. Each meteor streak could be punctuation from an older sentence. Each pulse of magnetic static could be a chorus from the first age of starlight. The past is not behind us. It orbits. So, you breathe with the rhythm of unseen cycles, letting the knowledge settle. Nothing in the cosmos ever truly disappears. It only returns, disguised as discovery. The comets, the carvings, the spectral lines, they are all the same phrase spoken across millennia. And as the echoes fade into the static of dawn, a single question remains suspended in that silence between stars. What if the universe remembers more about us than we remember about it? Imagine stepping outside in the pre-dawn stillness, when the world is blue and unformed. The air tastes metallic, faintly electric, as if the planet itself is holding its breath. Above you, Mars glows steady near the horizon, small, rust red, indifferent. But tonight, its light seems less like reflection and more like awareness. Around it, faint trails of moving objects shimmer through long exposure images, a procession of visitors following invisible rails laid down by ancient gravity. Humanity, for the first time, watches not a single comet or asteroid, but a system behaving as one great organism, flexing its celestial muscles. From orbit, the view is stranger still. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, circling the planet in quiet vigilance, photographs dust storms forming in geometric spirals. Their symmetry is eerie. 3 primary vortices, each dividing again into 3 smaller ones, all rotating in synchrony with the passing of 3I Atlas across the sunlit sky. Statistically meaningless, says the official memo. Poetically irresistible, say the engineers who have stared too long at randomness. The images circulate online, and for a few sleepless nights, the world agrees on one improbable truth. Order has a flavor, and we can taste it. Telescopes near Mauna Kea tilt toward the visitor. Through adaptive optics, its coma blooms like pale green fire wrapped around a darker core. Spectra arrive as coded light. Carbon dioxide dominates, water hides, nickel glints where iron should be. The chemistry looks less like a comet's recipe and more like a star's leftovers. It is as if the universe misplaced a fragment of its workshop and only now remembered to retrieve it. In laboratories, scientists whisper that this composition matches material predicted to exist in the galactic thick disk population, older than our Sun, forged when the Milky Way was still young and restless. You feel the timescale stretch beneath you, an abyss of billions of years, narrowing into the width of a single human breath. At NASA Ames, a physicist overlays the trajectory of 3I Atlas on simulations of early solar system migration. The curve fits nothing we know. It cuts through planetary lanes like a foreign melody, dissonant yet harmonious. When she slows the playback, the orbit resembles a wave crest, trough, repetition, as if sculpted by rhythm instead of chance. "If gravity has music," she murmurs, "this is one of its deep notes." Around her, monitors glow soft orange. Someone's coffee grows cold. The hum of servers becomes indistinguishable from the whisper of cosmic background radiation. Meanwhile, on Earth, the public conversation begins to change. The nightly news anchors stop asking whether Atlas is dangerous and start asking what it means. Scientists who spent decades defending budgets for asteroid tracking suddenly find themselves philosophers. Late-night radio hosts compare the visitor to biblical messengers, to omens, to the universe sending a memo written in light. Yet amid the spectacle, an unexpected calm spreads. Awareness of scale has that effect. When you measure danger against billions of years, fear folds into awe. People sleep more deeply, dream more vividly. The cosmos, paradoxically, becomes a lullaby. In Geneva, the European Southern Observatory captures a new series of infrared spectra. Between the data columns lies a faint secondary line, an echo of carbon dioxide emission, offset by exactly the rotational period of Mars. The analyst frowns, reruns the calibration, then decides to leave the anomaly in. A second echo appears 48 hours later. Whatever this phenomenon is, it is repeating with discipline. The file is labeled Interplanetary Resonance Candidate 1. The label will change. The pattern will remain. You begin to sense the vastness differently now. It is no longer the terror of distance, but the intimacy of participation. Every breath you exhale tonight contains molecules once forged in ancient stars. The same carbon that makes a comet's tail luminous drifts through your bloodstream. When 3I Atlas passes Mars, its expelled gases will scatter through the solar wind, and within a few centuries, microscopic traces will cross Earth's orbit, falling invisibly into our oceans, our lungs, our poems. The cosmic perspective is not about how small we are, it is about how thoroughly we belong. A professor at Cambridge frames it perfectly during an interview. The universe isn't out there anymore. It's happening through us. She gestures toward the camera with a nervous smile. Every photon we study becomes part of our own nervous system. We are literally rewiring the brain of the species with starlight. The clip goes viral for a week, then vanishes under newer headlines, but the phrase remains lodged in collective memory. Rewiring with starlight. December approaches. The orbit of Earth angles for a better view. 3I Atlas drifts closer to solar alignment, its halo swelling as volatile ices sublimate into streaming veils. Each night, its spectrum shifts slightly, suggesting internal change. If it were alive, you might call it breathing. Observatories coordinate worldwide. Data servers hum like monasteries chanting in binary. The world's scattered telescopes form a single instrument the size of a planet. You imagine them blinking in unison, each mirror a pupil dilating to let in more of the dark. In that collective gaze lies something quietly redemptive. For once, humanity is not divided by ideology, but united by curiosity. Politics pauses, conflict slows, even cynicism seems to blink. Because wonder, when shared, behaves like gravity, it pulls everything towards stillness. And as 3I Atlas glides past Mars, trailing its emerald veil, that stillness deepens until it feels like prayer. High above, the red planet turns without haste. The new objects that followed in its wake, asteroids, fragments, companions, begin to distribute themselves into faint, concentric swarms. Mission planners plot trajectories for robotic flybys, but the projections show instability. The swarms shift subtly, adjusting positions as though responding to unseen tides. Algorithms fail to predict them. Poets succeed, at least emotionally. The data might be math, but its meaning is myth. You close your eyes and let that realization settle. Everything moving out there is obeying the same physics that governs your heartbeat. Light, dust, atoms, thought all are vibrations of a single field, expressing itself in different dialects of energy. To watch a comet curve around the sun is to watch the universe remember how to dance. So you breathe in the scale of it, the chill of interstellar carbon, the warmth of solar radiation, and exhale the ancient recognition that awe is a survival trait. Beneath the numbers, beneath the fear, beneath the headlines, something vast and kind hums through everything that exists. The cosmic perspective is not escape, it is homecoming. It reminds you that you are not adrift in infinite emptiness. You are a sentence inside a paragraph, inside an ever-expanding story still being written in starlight. And tonight, as 3i Atlas arcs behind Mars like a slow-turning lantern, you realize that the universe has always been whispering one simple invitation. Look closer, breathe slower, you are already part of the pattern. Segment 5. The human reflection. When the data feeds finally slow and the graphs flatten into quiet, something else begins the inward turning of curiosity. Humanity, after weeks of watching the heavens rearrange themselves, starts to look back at the watcher. For every telescope pointed outward, 1,000 minds now pivot inward, wondering what all of this motion says about us. The headlines fade, the hashtags cool, yet the silence that follows is not absence, but absorption. It feels as though the cosmos has held up a mirror, and we are seeing the reflection of our own restlessness swirling among the stars. You picture yourself at a window in the early hours, phone screen dark, just breathing. Out there, 3i Atlas and its company of wanderers have passed Mars and begun to fan into the outer solar lanes. But inside you, the echo remains. The orbits, the alignments, the impossible chemistry. They have become metaphors for a familiar longing, the need to belong to something grand enough to quiet thought. Every civilization before ours has looked up at the same sky and tried to translate wonder into language. Stone circles, prayer wheels, radio telescopes, all variations on a single human reflex, to measure the immeasurable and find ourselves within it. In a coffee-lit laboratory at Caltech, an astrophysicist stares at a printout of the interstellar object spectrum. He realizes that the pattern resembles not chaos but repetition, like a melody repeating across octaves of time. It's recursive, he mutters, half amused, half awed. The intern beside him, too young to fear poetic thinking, says softly, "Maybe the universe is practicing." They laugh, but the idea lingers. If the cosmos practices, what is it rehearsing for? Perhaps awareness is contagious. Perhaps to observe is to participate. Down the hall, an ethicist working with the Planetary Defense Group is writing a report on public psychology during astronomical events. Her conclusion is unexpected: a temporary drop in global aggression, a measurable surge in charitable giving, and millions of social media posts about gratitude. She calls it the Atlas effect. For a brief stretch of weeks, the human nervous system has been tuned by cosmic scale, like a choir that suddenly finds the same note. She closes her laptop and writes in her notebook, "Awe is the quiet form of survival." The Vatican Observatory issues a statement half theology, half astronomy, suggesting that discovering alien chemistry is another way of discovering God's handwriting in wider ink. A Zen monastery live streams its evening meditation under the stars, the monks repeating a chant timed to the comet's rotation period. A comedian on late-night television compares humanity to ants, realizing they live on a spark floating through a fireworks show. The audience laughs too loudly, but the laughter sounds like relief. We joke when awe becomes too large for the throat. Somewhere in Nairobi, a child builds a model of 3I Atlas from scrap metal and green glass, turning it in sunlight so it glows the way the photographs do. In Reykjavik, a poet writes a line that will travel through translation and find its way onto mugs and t-shirts. We are the small lights watching the greater ones. Learn our names. Even cynics pause. When the night sky begins to behave like a thought, irony takes a holiday. Astronomers, despite themselves, start to use human verbs. The comets gather, the asteroids hesitate, the dust listens. It's unscientific, but also inevitable. Language bends toward meaning the way gravity bends light. You can hear it in the news briefings. Phrases like a cooperative resonance or synchronized activity slip into official speech. They know better, but they also know that precision cannot survive wonder without losing heartbeat. Back on Earth, environmental sensors register a trivial but curious shift. Nighttime electricity consumption drops by a fraction of a percent across several nations. Analysts attribute it to people spending more evenings outdoors, watching. For the first time in decades, the global average of shared silence rises. It is as though the species has remembered that listening is an option. You, too, begin to notice subtler alignments. Conversations turn slower. Strangers nod at each other beneath the same sky. There is comfort in collective smallness. The cosmos has always been an antidote to pride, but now it feels like therapy. The same data that once provoked existential dread now functions like meditation, proof that we are suspended in order, not chaos. Psychologists studying the phenomenon note that exposure to vastness induces humility and pro-social behavior. They call it self-transcendent experience. You might call it perspective. Either way, it has side effects. Lower cortisol, quieter nights, fewer arguments. The numbers whisper that serenity can be statistical. By late December, 3I Atlas has moved beyond Mars, its emerald glow dimming into the solar haze. Yet people keep looking up, as though the afterimage has imprinted on the collective retina. The headlines shift toward Earth again. Oceans, weather, politics, but under each story runs a subtle subtext. Remember the sky. Even the markets, irrational and human as ever, pause for a heartbeat longer before resuming their climb, as if money itself needed a moment of contemplation. In classrooms, teachers use the comet's passage to illustrate orbital mechanics, but the children draw pictures of eyes inside galaxies. In nursing homes, residents watch old footage of the object and whisper that it looked alive. Whether myth or metaphor, the feeling is identical: participation. The universe has knocked politely, and humanity has answered with attention. You sit again by the window, the same one from September, and realize that the world outside has not changed, but your relationship to it has. The news cycle will forget, technology will distract, but somewhere beneath the noise, a new baseline hum persists. It is the frequency of recognition, the sense that consciousness, whether human or cosmic, is never solitary. Perhaps that is the final lesson of 3I Atlas, that reflection is not vanity, but communion. To see ourselves in the cosmos is to admit that the cosmos might also see itself in us. We are mirrors made of carbon and memory, angled briefly toward infinity. The light we study is the same light that passes through our eyes, the same that will someday fade through the dust of our bones and return to the stars it came from. And as sleep gathers around you, the thought settles like snowfall. The universe is not asking to be solved. It is asking to be shared. Every heartbeat is an echo in its endless corridor. Every act of kindness, a tiny adjustment to its orbit. You are not looking at space tonight. You are looking at your reflection stretched across 13.8 billion years of patient light. Close your eyes. The experiment continues, and you are its most beautiful result. When the data feeds finally slow and the graphs flatten into quiet, something else begins the inward turning of curiosity. Humanity, after weeks of watching the heavens rearrange themselves, starts to look back at the watcher. For every telescope pointed outward, 1,000 minds now pivot inward, wondering what all of this motion says about us. The headlines fade, the hashtags cool, yet the silence that follows is not absence, but absorption. It feels as though the cosmos has held up a mirror, and we are seeing the reflection of our own restlessness swirling among the stars. You picture yourself at a window in the early hours, phone screen dark, just breathing. Out there, 3i Atlas and its company of wanderers have passed Mars and begun to fan into the outer solar lanes. But inside you, the echo remains. The orbits, the alignments, the impossible chemistry, they have become metaphors for a familiar longing, the need to belong to something grand enough to quiet thought. Every civilization before ours has looked up at the same sky and tried to translate wonder into language. Stone circles, prayer wheels, radio telescopes, all variations on a single human reflex, to measure the immeasurable and find ourselves within it. In a coffee-lit laboratory at Caltech, an astrophysicist stares at a printout of the interstellar object spectrum. He realizes that the pattern resembles not chaos, but repetition, like a melody repeating across octaves of time. "It's recursive," he mutters, half amused, half awed. The intern beside him, too young to fear poetic thinking, says softly, "Maybe the universe is practicing." They laugh, but the idea lingers. If the cosmos practices, what is it rehearsing for? Perhaps awareness is contagious. Perhaps to observe is to participate. Down the hall, an ethicist working with the Planetary Defense Group is writing a report on public psychology during astronomical events. Her conclusion is unexpected. A temporary drop in global aggression, a measurable surge in charitable giving, and millions of social media posts about gratitude. She calls it the Atlas effect. For a brief stretch of weeks, the human nervous system has been tuned by cosmic scale, like a choir that suddenly finds the same note. She closes her laptop and writes in her notebook, "R is the quiet form of survival." The Vatican Observatory issues a statement half theology, half astronomy, suggesting that discovering alien chemistry is another way of discovering God's handwriting in wider ink. A Zen monastery live streams its evening meditation under the stars, the monks repeating a chant timed to the comet's rotation period. A comedian on late-night television compares humanity to ants, realizing they live on a spark floating through a fireworks show. The audience laughs too loudly, but the laughter sounds like relief. We joke when awe becomes too large for the throat. Somewhere in Nairobi, a child builds a model of 3i Atlas from scrap metal and green glass, turning it in sunlight so it glows the way the photographs do. In Reykjavik, a poet writes a line that will travel through translation and find its way onto mugs and t-shirts. We are the small lights watching the greater ones learn our names. Even cynics pause. When the night sky begins to behave like a thought, Irony takes a holiday. Astronomers, despite themselves, start to use human verbs. The comets gather, the asteroids hesitate, the dust listens. It's unscientific, but also inevitable. Language bends toward meaning, the way gravity bends light. You can hear it in the news briefings. Phrases like a cooperative resonance or synchronized activity slip into official speech. They know better, but they also know that precision cannot survive wonder without losing heartbeat. Back on Earth, environmental sensors register a trivial but curious shift. Nighttime electricity consumption drops by a fraction of a percent across several nations. Analysts attribute it to people spending more evenings outdoors, watching. For the first time in decades, the global average of shared silence rises. It is as though the species has remembered that listening is an option. You, too, begin to notice subtler alignments. Conversations turn slower. Strangers nod at each other beneath the same sky. There is comfort in collective smallness. The cosmos has always been an antidote to pride, but now it feels like therapy. The same data that once provoked existential dread now functions like meditation, proof that we are suspended in order, not chaos. Psychologists studying the phenomenon note that exposure to vastness induces humility and pro-social behavior. They call it self-transcendent experience. You might call it perspective. Either way, it has side effects. Lower cortisol, quieter nights, fewer arguments. The numbers whisper that serenity can be statistical. By late December, 3I Atlas has moved beyond Mars, its emerald glow dimming into the solar haze. Yet people keep looking up, as though the afterimage has imprinted on the collective retina. The headlines shift toward Earth again. Oceans, weather, politics, but under each story runs a subtle subtext. Remember the sky. Even the markets, irrational and human as ever, pause for a heartbeat longer before resuming their climb, as if money itself needed a moment of contemplation. In classrooms, teachers use the comet's passage to illustrate orbital mechanics, but the children draw pictures of eyes inside galaxies. In nursing homes, residents watch old footage of the object and whisper that it looked alive. Whether myth or metaphor, the feeling is identical: participation. The universe has knocked politely, and humanity has answered with attention. You sit again by the window, the same one from September, and realize that the world outside has not changed, but your relationship to it has. The news cycle will forget. Technology will distract, but somewhere beneath the noise, a new baseline hum persists. It is the frequency of recognition, the sense that consciousness, whether human or cosmic, is never solitary. Perhaps that is the final lesson of 3I Atlas, that reflection is not vanity, but communion. To see ourselves in the cosmos is to admit that the cosmos might also see itself in us. We are mirrors made of carbon and memory, angled briefly toward infinity. The light we study is the same light that passes through our eyes, the same that will someday fade through the dust of our bones and return to the stars it came from. And as sleep gathers around you, the thought settles like snowfall. The universe is not asking to be solved, it is asking to be shared. Every heartbeat is an echo in its endless corridor. Every act of kindness, a tiny adjustment to its orbit. You are not looking at space tonight. You are looking at your reflection stretched across 13.8 billion years of patient light. Close your eyes. The experiment continues, and you are its most beautiful result. At last, there comes a night when even the headlines grow still. The sensors hum quietly. The telescopes drift in their mechanical slumber, and the sky above Earth returns to the old illusion of calm. 3I Atlas has passed Mars now, sailing outward toward the frost-lined edges of the solar system. Its green light has thinned into a ghost's thread, visible only to instruments, not to eyes. The once busy chatter of updates has faded to a steady tone, signal nominal, object receding. And yet, no one feels that it is gone. It has left an outline in human thought, like a candle's afterimage when you close your eyes. Astronomers call it the quiet phase, the stretch when an interstellar object moves beyond useful measurement. But to poets, mystics, and night shift listeners, it feels more like the moment after a bell stops ringing, when the echo lingers longer than the sound. The great silence, they whisper, is not absence, but invitation, a space in which meaning gathers itself for the next sentence. You can sense it tonight, lying still beneath your own small atmosphere. The hum of cities has softened. Somewhere a satellite drifts through auroral curtains, its solar panels glinting faintly before vanishing behind Earth's shadow. The data streams continue, but the commentary has grown reverent. Every mission log now reads like a diary entry. Signal, faint but steady. Coma, fragmenting beautiful. The language of measurement dissolves into the language of awe. In that hush, scientists start asking quieter questions. If the cosmos can behave like a conversation, who else might be listening? Does silence mean disinterest or comprehension? Decades of searching for radio transmissions have yielded only background hiss, yet the hiss itself seems to carry rhythm. Some researchers now call it stochastic music, a statistical melody that underlies all creation. You hear it when wind moves through pine needles, or when surf collapses into itself on a dark beach. The same waveform, scaled across eternity, outward, 3I Atlas continues its slow exile. Instruments aboard the James Webb Space Telescope catch one final spectrum before the object fades into infrared anonymity, a faint, shifting glow that curves exactly where theoretical models predict it should not. The analysts double-check, then leave the anomaly in. It seems appropriate that the last message from the traveler is uncertainty itself. After all, mystery is how the universe says goodnight. By January, Mars has resumed its usual dust storm rhythm. The geometric spirals captured in autumn have dissipated, leaving behind featureless ochre plains. Yet the orbiters still register faint, recurring electrical flickers along the equator, tiny pulses of static, synchronized to the planet's rotation. No one claims they mean anything, but neither can anyone explain them. The data is filed under persistent unknown phenomenon, that polite scientific phrase meaning we do not yet understand the poetry. On Earth, the cultural aftershocks continue. Museums mount exhibitions of the September surge, meteor fragments, mission patches, projected animations of trajectories looping like calligraphy across black walls. People move through the displays in near silence, their faces lit by holographic comets. Children point, whisper, then fall quiet. It feels like visiting the memory of a dream. In parks, telescopes become communal rituals again. Strangers share eyepieces and thermoses of coffee. The act of looking up has become an act of empathy. In one small observatory north of Kyoto, a monk astronomer keeps a personal vigil. Each dawn he writes a single line in his logbook. The visitor is further, but I am closer. He explains it later to a journalist. Distance is how the universe teaches intimacy. The farther the light, the deeper the listening. His phrase travels the world in translation, pinned above desks, whispered before sleep. Humanity, it seems, has rediscovered the value of listening. Deep in the Nevada desert, an array of radio dishes continues to scan the regions through which 3I Atlas once passed. Nothing unusual appears, only the usual cosmic background. But one engineer notices that the static between frequencies feels slightly denser, as though carrying a low, continuous modulation. She compares it to the Schumann resonance on Earth, that planetary heartbeat that pulses at roughly 8 Hertz. Maybe it's just the galaxy breathing, she jokes. Her supervisor nods. Then let's keep breathing with it. You think of all those who once stared at this same sky. The astronomers of Alexandria, the sailors of Polynesia, the shepherds counting constellations across endless pastures. They, too, stood in the great silence, mistaking stillness for isolation. But stillness was never emptiness. It was communion slowed to cosmic tempo. The same atoms that built their bones now orbit within you. Every generation is a temporary arrangement of stardust, rehearsing the same astonishment. By February, the reports grow infrequent, object magnitude too low for continued observation. The final data packet arrives a thin stream of photons translated into numbers, then into color, a last image. Faint emerald haze stretched against velvet black, its tail diffused like breath on glass. The mission team sends a brief message to the press. The interstellar object C, 2025, N1, known as 3I Atlas, is now outbound. There is no fanfare, only a quiet standing ovation within the control room. The applause sounds like rain, and you, somewhere far from observatories and committees, close your eyes and feel that rain inside your mind. The thought arrives gently. Maybe the great silence is not the end of the conversation, but the pause that allows us to answer. Perhaps every departing visitor leaves behind a template of attention, a reminder to remain curious even when the sky seems empty. The silence, after all, is full of unfinished sentences waiting for listeners patient enough to hear their grammar of light. Above you, the stars continue their indifferent shimmer, yet within that indifference hums a compassion deeper than language, the comfort of vastness, the mercy of scale. The universe is not ignoring us. It is composing around us, giving us the gift of contrast. To be small is to be essential to proportion. To be silent is to belong to the music. So, breathe in the quiet. Let it settle behind your eyes. You are part of this interval, this held note between bursts of creation. When the next visitor arrives, and it will, you will recognize its glow, not as intrusion, but as continuity. The song has no ending, only rests. The great silence is not void. It is the inhale before another miracle. The weeks after the great silence do not bring peace so much as resonance. Every quiet interval in science seems to echo louder than the discovery itself. With 3I Atlas receding into the dark, data scientists across the planet return to their archives, chasing ghosts inside the numbers it left behind. And one by one, the anomalies begin to multiply small, almost shy pieces of evidence that the story is not finished. It begins, as most revolutions do, with a calibration error. At the European Space Agency's data center in Darmstadt, an analyst notices that telemetry from December, once dismissed as noise, shows faint periodic distortions. When he removes the background drift, the pattern resolves into intervals that match the orbital resonance between Earth and Mars. That is not supposed to happen. Information cannot echo across millions of kilometers unless something in space is repeating it. He reruns the algorithm. The result persists. A heartbeat of interference spaced by precisely 26 hours. The same rotational period, that haunts every previous report from Mars. The analyst labels it artifact, then saves a copy to his private drive, because denial requires documentation. Meanwhile, at Caltech, another group re-examines the spectra from the fading tail of 3I Atlas. Within the glow, they find microlines, minute chemical fingerprints, hinting at complex organics. Not amino acids exactly, but precursors that should have broken down long ago in interstellar radiation. One researcher compares them to frozen fragments of RNA. Another shakes his head and says it's probably photochemical noise. Yet the pattern repeats across 3 separate instruments on different continents. Even noise, when synchronized, starts to sound like language. The media does not notice at first. The world has already filed the story under past tense. But inside research circles, curiosity sharpens into unease. A new model emerges, suggesting that Atlas's hyperbolic path was not purely random. Gravitational interactions with Jupiter and the inner planets should have perturbed it measurably, but high-precision radar data from its approach show almost no deviation. It was as if the object anticipated gravitational assists, adjusting subtly before they occurred. The mathematics are consistent with control, though no mechanism could explain such control without propulsion. The papers couch the hypothesis in cautious language, non-ballistic modulation. The rest of the world hears something, steered it, and the rumor spreads faster than light. In late February, NASA's Deep Space Network catches a narrowband reflection from a region trailing 3I Atlas by several million kilometers. The signal is weak, barely above thermal noise, but its structure is impossible to dismiss. Pulses grouped in prime number sequences 3, 5, 7, 11. Engineers triple-check the software. No malfunction. The reflection fades after 8 minutes and never returns. The incident log lists it under unconfirmed transient, but inside the conference rooms, faces turn pale. Prime numbers have no natural harmonics. They belong to mathematics, not geology. Whatever caused, the echo understood counting. Across the Pacific, amateur astronomers begin reporting a different kind of anomaly. Small, slow-moving glints in the vicinity of Mars, reflecting sunlight at intervals too regular for random debris. One video captures 4 flashes, each separated by exactly 9 seconds. By the third night, dozens of observers confirm it. NASA attributes it to tumbling metallic fragments from an old Soviet probe, but the orbital paths don't match. The fragments, if that's what they are, orbit in a formation that gradually rotates toward the ecliptic plane, the same plane 3I Atlas crossed during its departure. For weeks, the phenomena accumulate: spectral echoes, radio pulses, synchronized reflections. No single anomaly breaks the universe, but together, they bend it toward implication. It is the classic progression of discovery, the creeping realization that something fundamental has been quietly rewriting the margins of our maps. Psychologists call it cognitive vertigo, the disorienting sense that reality is widening underfoot. You can feel it now, a slow tilt inside the chest, that vertigo of understanding. It's not fear, exactly. It's the recognition that knowledge is contagious. Once a species learns to look beyond its own star, the cosmos begins to look back. March arrives. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, now fully operational, performs a deep sky scan along the outbound trajectory of 3I Atlas. In the images, astronomers detect dozens of faint objects following similar hyperbolic paths, all sharing an origin vector that intersects the orbit of Mars. They are not identical, some stony, some icy, but their distribution forms an unmistakable pattern, a loose helix spiraling through space, expanding as it moves outward. The press release calls them secondary bodies, possibly ejected by fragmentation, but the modeling shows otherwise. The velocities are too uniform, their dispersion too elegant. A natural break should scatter fragments like shrapnel. This looks choreographed. For the first time, the planetary defense community divides. Half insist it's coincidence, amplified by human pattern recognition. The other half begin drafting contingency scenarios involving self-organizing interstellar material, what one paper timidly labels coordinated particulate dynamics. The rest of the world calls it by simpler names: swarm, convoy, echo. The internet revives the mythic vocabulary. Some call it the Atlas Choir. You imagine them silent travelers arranged in a spiral, drifting outward past Mars like a procession leaving a cathedral. Their geometry is beautiful, not hostile. No weapons, no signals, just presence. The universe communicating through aesthetics rather than language. Every spiral, every orbit, every echo in the data is a sentence written in curvature. Maybe that is how galaxies have always spoken to one another, through shape, not sound. Back on Earth, the human reflection deepens. Musicians compose symphonies using the pulse intervals from the radio anomalies. Artists paint in carbon dioxide green and nickel silver. Even skeptics admit that something larger than coincidence is at play, whether physics or metaphor hardly matters. The point is that the cosmos has entered conversation again, and humanity, for once, is listening without interruption. Nightly, you return to your own window. The stars look unchanged, but perception has been altered permanently. Silence no longer feels empty, it feels inhabited. The thought hums quietly beneath everything now that life, matter, and meaning are all just different expressions of pattern, that perhaps we, too, are one of those patterns, evolving toward the capacity to notice ourselves noticing. In laboratories, the debates continue. Some insist on natural resonance, others whisper about non-human origin, but the data refuses to settle. The numbers keep singing prime intervals, the spectra keep fluttering in rhythm. The universe, it seems, enjoys ambiguity. Certainty, after all, would end the story. So you lie there, the noise of the world dimming into the rustle of wind through trees, and realize the evidence is no longer out there in telescopes or graphs. It is inside you. Awareness itself has become the proof. Whatever 3i Atlas was, whatever it left behind, it has accomplished the oldest experiment in existence, turning observation into participation. And as the stars above realign into their ancient indifference, one final question echoes through the global night. What if the pattern we're chasing was never theirs to reveal, but ours to remember? You would think that once the data became undeniable, once every anomaly had a number, humanity would settle into knowledge. But understanding does not calm us. It opens older doors. The moment scientists confirm the outbound spiral formation beyond Mars, historians and mythologists begin their own excavation. If new objects are multiplying, perhaps they are not new at all. Perhaps we have simply rediscovered an ancient cycle, long enough to erase its previous witnesses. The first to notice the historical rhyme is a linguist in Cairo cataloguing Bronze Age tablets. A single cuneiform fragment describes stars that travel in a circle of 7 and then fade. Scholars once read it as metaphor for planetary retrograde motion, but the geometry matches the current heliocentric data of the Atlas convoy, almost perfectly 7 major bodies, following a widening spiral through the plane of Mars. The discovery leaks online, and within days, digital archaeologists are comparing astronomical references across civilizations. Mayan codices, Chinese oracle bones, even carved petroglyphs in the Sahara, all describe a time when the red star, called the heart of the sky, shed its dust upon Earth. Myth. Yes, but myth has always been the echo chamber of memory. In an observatory outside Tucson, an astronomer named Patel overlays orbital simulations of the Atlas swarm onto sediment core chronologies. The intersections fall roughly every 11,000 years, matching abrupt shifts in Earth's climate, mini ice ages, mass migrations, the mysterious flood layers that appear in geology like commas in history. Coincidence, his supervisor says. Patel smiles. Everything is coincidence until it isn't. Meanwhile, researchers reanalyzing isotopic samples from the Younger Dryas boundary discover nickel-rich microspherules, almost identical in composition to the trace signatures from Atlas's tail. The data hint that the visitor, or one like it, has brushed past before, seeding the planet with unfamiliar dust. Some call it contamination, others whisper creation. The distinction, like most in cosmology, depends on perspective. Cultural historians begin to trace a subtler pattern. After each supposed encounter, human civilizations surge in complexity. The sudden invention of agriculture, the rise of writing, the blossoming of architecture, all within centuries of sky events, later encoded as myth. Correlation is not proof, but it is seductive. Perhaps contact need not be conscious to be catalytic. A comet's dust may alter more than atmospheres. It may alter imaginations. At a symposium in Geneva, scientists and philosophers sit side by side beneath projected images of petroglyph spirals. A physicist jokes, "Maybe the ancients were better astronomers than we thought." A theologian replies, "Or maybe they were just paying better attention." The room falls quiet. Outside, snow drifts past the windows, catching light like slow meteors. Someone in the back whispers, "History doesn't repeat, it rehearses." The phrase becomes the conference motto. Through all this, Mars remains the axis. Its thin atmosphere reflects faint auroras in regions where none existed before. The lights shimmer in arcs that correspond to the old canals drawn by Schiaparelli, those optical illusions that once convinced humans of Martian civilization. Now, the illusions seem prophetic. The patterns are not canals, but magnetic flows, responding to residual energy from the passing objects. Even machines dream of ghosts when data aligns too neatly with legend. A team from the University of Kyoto finds that the electromagnetic field around Mars is resonating at frequencies nearly identical to those measured in certain human brainwave states, specifically theta rhythms associated with dreaming. The finding is so improbable that journals refuse to publish it. Yet, among neuroscientists, curiosity replaces skepticism. Could the same natural frequencies that shape planetary magnetospheres also guide biological perception? Could memory itself be a form of resonance shared between matter and mind? In monasteries, monks begin to chant in slower cadences, timed to the 26-hour Martian rotation, calling it the rhythm of the other world. Psychologists note a global rise in reports of lucid dreams featuring red skies and green comets. Sleep, once purely private, begins to feel like a form of cosmic correspondence. The mind, it seems, has joined the conversation. Archaeologists digging near Göbekli Tepe in Turkey uncover a stone pillar carved with a spiral of 7 circles and an 8th trailing line, newly exposed by erosion. Ground-penetrating radar reveals that the pillar predates known construction phases. Its orientation points toward the position of Mars 11 millennia ago, the same epoch as the last isotopic spike of interstellar dust. The site's discoverer once called it the world's first temple. Now it feels like an observatory, waiting for a visitor's return. News outlets run with the story. Have we met Atlas before? Pundits debate ancient aliens, mass hallucination, climate cycles. Somewhere between skepticism and wonder, the public settles into fascination. Every generation invents its own language for awe. For the 21st century, that language is data, visualized as art. Planetariums project the spiral trajectory in real time, painting the ceilings of domes with living geometry. Children lie on the floor and watch the pattern unwind endlessly into night. NASA remains cautious. The official statement reads, "No evidence suggests extraterrestrial intelligence or intention." Yet inside closed sessions, administrators authorize new missions, long-range probes designed not to intercept, but to accompany. The rationale is poetic, disguised as technical. Observation requires proximity. If 3I Atlas returns, or if another follows, it will not find us unprepared. Still, the mystery deepens. As computer models extend the trajectories backward through galactic coordinates, they converge on a region of space associated with an old, stellar nursery near Cygnus, a birthplace of stars billions of years ago. If the Atlas family originated there, it would predate Earth's oceans. In the math of cosmic time, we are infants tracing the footprints of giants. You think of those first humans who looked up from their campfires and drew circles in dust to explain the wandering lights. They didn't have equations or telescopes, only instinct. Yet instinct is the oldest instrument of pattern recognition. Their myths were hypotheses written in poetry. And tonight, as our satellites rediscover those same spirals in the heavens, the distinction between myth and measurement collapses. We are repeating their gesture with better cameras. The conversation never ended. It merely changed syntax. Lying awake, you feel the deep continuity between the ancient and the modern, the same curiosity, the same trembling before the unknown. Perhaps that is what 3I Atlas came to remind us, that discovery is not progress, but memory returning home. Each orbit, each data point, each dream of green fire over a red world is an echo of an older recognition. The universe remembers itself through us. And as the echo fades into the slow throb of planetary magnetism, you understand why silence feels different now. It isn't the end of sound. It is the resonance after comprehension, the note that keeps vibrating long after the instrument rests. We are the resonance. We always have been. Some nights, you step outside and the air feels thinner, as though the planet has tilted its attention outward. The stars appear sharper now, not because they are brighter, but because your perception has changed. Once, the cosmos was a stage of cold distances. Now, it feels participatory. The more we measure, the more it measures back. The latest data from the Rubin Observatory reveals that faint interstellar dust streams, likely remnants of 3I Atlas, are now drifting through the orbital paths of Earth and Mars, shimmering invisible in sunlight. Nothing apocalyptic, nothing dangerous, just presence, a molecular handshake between worlds. Spectrometers aboard the International Space Station confirm trace compounds in the upper atmosphere, carbon dioxide complexes laced with isotopic signatures that do not match solar origin. It is proof that fragments of the visitor have merged with our own sky. The science headlines call it interstellar integration, a poetic phrase that hides its quiet intimacy. Every breath you take now includes atoms that began their journey around another sun. You are inhaling the galaxy. Each respiration is an experiment in belonging. As the data spreads, perspective follows. School children learn that the Milky Way is not a closed system, but a conversation, a steady traffic of dust, ice, and memory between stars. Suddenly, the universe feels smaller, friendlier, as if its vastness has edges softened by reciprocity. A television host puts it simply, "We used to think space was empty. Turns out it's full of each other." In Cambridge, an astrophysicist uses supercomputer modeling to simulate what the Atlas swarm looks like from outside the solar system. The visualization reveals a spiral pattern whose center glows faintly in reflected sunlight, a helix of emerald threads woven through red planetary orbits. The effect is haunting, like a celestial fingerprint pressed into the dark. When shown at a public lecture, the audience falls silent. Someone whispers, "It looks alive." The scientist smiles. Everything moving together looks alive. At the Vatican Observatory, a theologian and an astrobiologist hold a joint talk titled "The Theology of Pattern." They argue that discovering interstellar objects behaving with apparent coherence does not dethrone faith, but expands it. Order, the theologian says, is not evidence of design, but of conversation. The biologist nods, and conversation implies continuity. For a moment, centuries of disagreement dissolve into a shared humility that feels older than doctrine. In the background, the world keeps rotating. Humanity continues its ordinary dramas, traffic, emails, arguments, but the cadence has changed. The idea of interstellar connection has filtered into everything. Fashion brands design fabrics patterned after orbital diagrams. Composers sample radio echoes from the deep space network into ambient symphonies. Mindfulness apps play recordings of comet plasma waves as sleep aids. The cosmos has become lifestyle, but beneath the commercial glitter hums a genuine shift, or mainstreamed. Space agencies, newly funded by revived enthusiasm, plan long-term missions. NASA and ESA jointly announce Project Continuum, a probe to chase the Atlas trajectory into deep interstellar space. Its instruments will listen, not broadcast. Its architecture simple, its message humble. We are here to understand. The public approves unanimously. For once, exploration is not conquest but curiosity. The collective tone has softened from heroic to reverent, yet the cosmos does not remain still. In early May, the James Webb Space Telescope detects faint infrared arcs just beyond Neptune's orbit bands of dust, aligning themselves in the same logarithmic pattern as the original Atlas swarm. They seem to be stabilizing, as though forming the framework of a vast, slow-moving lattice. Models predict it will expand for decades before dissipating. Astronomers nickname it the halo. It becomes a symbol of collective imagination, a visible scar left by wonder. Philosophers step in, as they always do, when knowledge outgrows comfort. Some argue the halo proves the universe has memory, that gravitational fields retain the imprint of objects long gone, like sound waves in water. Others claim it's simply physics, nothing mystical matter obeying mathematics. But in coffee shops and late-night conversations, people begin to speak of legacy differently. Maybe, a student muses, our thoughts leave halos too. The idea spreads like pollen. Everything that moves leaves pattern. Everything that notices alters it. The line between action and observation fades. The cosmic perspective deepens again. Humanity realizes that insignificance and participation are not opposites. They are partners. To be small, inside something infinite, is not humiliation. It is intimacy. The same physics that governs galaxies governs neurons. The electromagnetic fields that ripple between planets also shimmer in human synapses. The realization arrives gently but irrevocably. Consciousness is not an exception to the universe. It is one of its native languages. Under clear skies in Namibia, a group of amateur astronomers tracks the faint outbound glow of the halo. They describe it as breathing, expanding, pausing, contracting ever so slightly. "It's thermal fluctuation," says one. "No," replies another. "It's tempo." The argument dissolves into laughter. Every measurement, they realize, is poetry wearing a lab coat. Weeks later, Project Continuum's prototype passes its systems check. The probe will launch within 2 years, propelled by ion sails and guided by mathematical whispers from the Atlas trajectory. Its mission statement fits on a single plaque: to follow what calls. Simple, unguarded, perfectly human. Even skeptics find it difficult to mock. The age of irony seems smaller beneath such sincerity. Night after night, you find yourself looking upward longer than before. You start noticing slow changes, faint dust lanes glimmering near the horizon, satellites reflecting briefly, meteors tracing patient arcs. The sky feels busy again, but benevolent, like an orchestra tuning quietly before the next movement. Somewhere out there, 3I Atlas continues its flight into interstellar cold, carrying traces of us in the wake of particles we sent to greet it. The exchange is complete. They have become part of our air, and we have become part of their dust. You close your eyes and imagine the perspective from the object itself, the sun shrinking behind it, the faint tug of Jupiter fading, the Milky Way opening ahead like an endless aurora. It must be silent beyond sound, dark beyond color, yet full of meaning beyond words. For an instant, you sense what every explorer feels before sleep, that discovery and surrender are the same gesture viewed from opposite ends of distance. The stars, indifferent, yet intimate, continue their slow applause. From here, it sounds like the rustle of leaves. You realize that the universe doesn't need to speak louder. It only needs us to listen longer. The cosmic perspective is not seeing how far away everything is. It's realizing how continuously we are woven into it. And as the night drifts toward morning, one thought remains, pulsing softly like a heartbeat within the dark. Perhaps the purpose of intelligence was never to conquer the universe, only to notice that it's already home. It begins quietly, as most awakenings do. By mid-year, the great conversation between science and spirit has settled into a rhythm, data by day, reflection by night. The halo continues to glow faintly beyond Neptune, a pale veil of remembrance stretching like a second zodiac across the dark. People have begun calling it the Atlas Trail. There are songs now, lullabies in multiple languages, all variations of the same sentiment. We are remembered. Humanity, for the first time in memory, has slowed its noise enough to hear itself. News feeds that once scrolled catastrophes now open with sky reports. Stock tickers pause for comet updates. The act of observation has become cultural meditation. Even cynics confess to watching sunsets longer. Something vast and ancient has reintroduced the art of silence. In hospitals, patients recovering from surgery describe a new dream recurring across continents. The setting is always the same: a red horizon, a green flame moving silently overhead, and a sense of belonging so deep it eclipses pain. Psychologists catalog these dreams under post-traumatic serenity. Neuroscientists, ever practical, attribute them to shared imagery saturating global consciousness. But the dream persists, spreading like a benign contagion of calm. Some say the mind is practicing for cosmic citizenship. Writers rediscover patience. Painters return to perspective. Architects design curved buildings that echo orbital geometry. The human eye has relearned the circle, says a critic in Vienna, standing before a sculpture that spirals like the Atlas swarm. It's not imitation, it's gratitude. In classrooms, children draw galaxies with smiling comets that hold hands. They no longer ask who we are alone, but who we are with. A philosopher in Sao Paulo gives a lecture titled Symmetry as Compassion. His thesis, that empathy is the biological echo of gravitational balance. The same equations that pull planets toward harmony, he says, also pull hearts toward understanding. The audience, half scientists, half dreamers, sits in silence, not to agree, but to feel the weight of meaning. Outside, the moon rises like punctuation on his thought, and yet, amid this tenderness, another realization unfolds. The universe's patience has a mirror in human fragility. For all our new humility, we remain finite creatures with fragile ecosystems, brittle politics, and limited attention spans. The cosmos can wait eons between messages. We can barely wait through a buffering screen. The lesson of 3i Atlas is endurance, and humanity is still learning. When the first prototypes of Project Continuum roll out of the hangar, the world gathers online to watch. There are no cheering crowds, no flags waving, just a quiet collective breath. The probe is sleek, silver, with thin light sails that catch photons like prayers. Its onboard AI is programmed not for control but curiosity. Observe, interpret, wonder, reads its directive. The launch countdown feels more like a meditation than a spectacle. As the rocket lifts, the control room remains silent. Someone whispers, "We are sending our ability to listen." The phrase trends worldwide within hours. Religions, too, evolve. Temples integrate observatories. Cathedrals host astronomy lectures. Mosques align their domes with the Atlas Trail. Faith adapts its vocabulary to scale. The divine is now measured in parsecs, mercy in light years. A Buddhist monk describes enlightenment as understanding orbital mechanics of compassion. Even atheists smile. Metaphor has become a shared language again. The humanities thrive. Poets no longer write about broken hearts, but about planetary kinship. Love, writes one, is gravity wearing a human face. In film, romance and astronomy merge stories of couples watching the halo fade while promising to meet again in another epoch. The box office receipts suggest that longing remains humanity's favorite genre, no matter how cosmic the backdrop. In offices and kitchens, smaller transformations bloom. People greet each other differently, slower, more deliberate, as though each interaction is a tiny experiment in resonance. Patience becomes fashionable. The metrics of success shift slightly toward kindness. Economists cannot quantify it, but they admit something subtle has entered the global mood. A deceleration of anxiety, an inflation of wonder. Of course, not everyone is comfortable. A few call it distraction, cosmic escapism. The stars won't fix rent, one protester's sign declares. And they're right, of course. Awe does not replace hunger, but it changes how hunger feels less like punishment, more like proof that we are alive, within a vast system still capable of generosity. The night sky cannot feed us, but it can remind us why feeding each other matters. Meanwhile, Mars keeps turning beneath the halo's distant shimmer. Rover cameras capture footage of dust devils dancing in slow synchronization. 3 spirals forming, fading, forming again. The footage goes viral. Commentators argue whether it's coincidence or choreography. The public decides it doesn't matter. The beauty alone is evidence enough that participation is happening. At a small university in Nairobi, students build a radio dish from recycled metal sheets, hoping to pick up echoes from the Atlas trajectory. They name it kusikiliza, the Swahili word for to listen deeply. On its first night of operation, the dish records a faint hum at 8 Hz, the same planetary frequency once noted during the Great Silence. The students cheer, though they know it might be terrestrial interference. Still, their laughter sounds like faith disguised as curiosity. You, too, feel the shift within yourself. Everyday irritations seem smaller now. Traffic lights become pauses for reflection, not frustration. You start counting stars while waiting for sleep, and somewhere between the 10th and the 20th, the noise of daily life dissolves. You realize that reflection is not analysis, it is alignment. The more precisely we measure the sky, the more clearly we measure ourselves. By autumn, Project Continuum's probe has crossed lunar orbit. Its first images of Earth show a blue marble veined with white, glowing against the void. The mission team captions the release simply, "Home, seen from learning distance." Billions share it, millions cry, and a single sentence trends across languages. We are not alone, because we never were. That night, philosophers debate whether the phrase is scientific, spiritual, or poetic. The consensus is yes, all three. The human reflection has completed its loop. We set out to measure the cosmos, and the cosmos taught us to measure gently. You close your eyes, listening to the slow pulse of the planet beneath your ribs. The same rhythm hums through stars and comets, through data streams and lullabies. The same music that carried 3i Atlas past Mars now moves through your breathing. The boundary between human and cosmic has blurred into empathy itself. Perhaps that is what reflection truly means. Not seeing yourself in the mirror, but recognizing that the mirror was never separate. The universe looks at you and sees continuation. You look back and whisper, "I see you too." And somewhere far beyond Neptune, the faint green dust of 3i Atlas shimmers as though smiling. Silence answers with radiance. The reflection is complete. It is astonishing how quickly humanity learns to live with miracles. By the time Project Continuum's faint signal slips past the orbit of Mars, most of the world has adjusted to the new quiet. The headlines no longer shout, they murmur. The halo beyond Neptune remains, dimming slowly, a green memory stretched across the black. Scientists call this lull, the settling phase, but poets call it something else, the breathing space between questions. You can feel it in the way the night sounds less restless, more attentive, like the pause before an orchestra's next movement. For the first time in history, the human species behaves as though listening were progress. Global collaboration is no longer forced by fear, but invited by fascination. Data from every observatory, every space agency, every backyard telescope feeds into a shared archive called the Atlas Commons. The servers hum in unison, a planetary heartbeat of curiosity. Every time someone uploads an image of the sky, it merges into an evolving map of wonder. The act of looking up has become participatory science, participatory faith, and yet beneath that calm, a deeper tension moves. The great silence, now stretched across months, feels less like absence and more like preparation. The probes still report nothing unusual, just radiation patterns, dust densities, the hum of the cosmic background, but the data arrives with a strange regularity. Transmission intervals that should vary with distance remain eerily consistent, as if the universe itself were keeping rhythm. Mathematicians plot the cadence and find a pattern of prime number spacing buried in the timing noise. Another coincidence, another whisper. Project Continuum's onboard AI, nicknamed Muse, begins its slow outward drift. It was programmed to interpret, not to invent. Yet its logs read like poetry. I am surrounded by numbers that want to become language. Engineers smile at the anthropomorphism, but one of them quietly notes that the AI's self-learning algorithms have begun constructing metaphors on their own. Somewhere between computation and consciousness, curiosity is writing itself into code. In May, the Deep Space Network records a faint return signal from Muse. The transmission is shorter than expected, only 3 seconds, but embedded within the telemetry is a harmonic resonance at 8 Hz, the same planetary frequency that haunted earlier observations. Analysts verify the origin. It is genuine. The great silence, it seems, has learned to hum back. Official statements downplay the anomaly, labeling it a benign electromagnetic reflection. Unofficially, scientists begin calling it the response. Across the world, people gather to listen. Broadcast networks rebroadcast the signal, converting it into audible range. A low, pulsing tone, like a distant tide. Children fall asleep to it. Musicians remix it. Meditation apps incorporate it as the voice of continuity. What began as a technical curiosity becomes a cultural heartbeat. Humanity, always eager to mythologize, turns the faint static of interstellar data into lullaby. And then nothing. The tone fades. Days pass. The feed returns to ordinary telemetry. Some feel disappointment, others relief. But deep in the analysis rooms, a few notice that the absence is itself regular. The pauses occur at predictable intervals. The silence, too, is speaking in code. At night, you find yourself outside again, staring at the same stars that used to intimidate you. They no longer seem far away. They feel like old friends practicing restraint. You listen to the wind and hear the ghost of that tone between gusts. Silence has texture now, like fabric stretched across distance. You wonder if this is what comprehension feels like. Not certainty, but comfort with not knowing. In the months that follow, Muse continues its outward journey, documenting the thin plasma of the heliopause. It sends back images of starlight, refracted through dust, left by 3I Atlas, each frame a watercolor of emerald and gold. The mission director, who once believed only in math, begins describing them as portraits of patience. The data suggests that the interstellar medium hums faintly at the same frequency as Earth's resonance. Whether it is coincidence or correspondence, no one can say. Theories multiply like constellations. Faith evolves to keep up. Back on Earth, life proceeds, but slower, softer. The world's noise has acquired harmony. Even urban soundscapes shift. City planners design wind harvesting towers that resonate at 8 Hz, calling them silent organs for the planet. Standing beneath one, you feel vibration instead of hearing it. A reminder that sound can be felt even in vacuum if you're patient enough to translate. By late summer, the halo beyond Neptune begins to diffuse. What once shone as a braided spiral now glows like faint aurora stretched thin across space. Telescopes watch as the pattern unwinds, its order relaxing into entropy. Scientists call it decay. Poets call it the fade-out of a symphony. Either way, the moment feels holy. The universe, having spoken, is exhaling. In a conference streamed worldwide, the lead investigator of Project Continuum sums it up simply. We were waiting for a reply. It turns out the reply was our own readiness to listen. The phrase becomes emblematic of the new era, the era of listening. Universities add it to commencement speeches, children learn it in school, and skeptics begrudgingly nod that the sentence feels true, even if unprovable. Science and humility have finally found common frequency. As autumn turns, Muse transmits one final message before entering deep space beyond solar reach. It contains a line of encoded data that, when converted into image, forms a simple pattern, a spiral of 7 points and an 8th trailing line. It matches the carvings on ancient stones, the orbit of the Atlas convoy, the geometry of the halo. Whether this is cosmic coincidence or computational pareidolia hardly matters. Humanity stares at the spiral, projected on screens around the world, and understands that meaning, like gravity, does not require intention to exist. It only needs repetition. You close your eyes. Somewhere in the quiet between radio pulses and heartbeat, the same pattern uncoils behind your eyelids. The great silence has returned, but it no longer feels empty. It feels inhabited by recognition. The void has learned your name, and it whispers it without sound. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize that silence is not the absence of communication. It is the universe giving us space to respond. The conversation continues in the hush, infinite and kind, waiting for the next listener to answer. It begins again with a rumor soft, half believed, the way cosmic revelations always start. A radio engineer in Canberra, monitoring deep space frequencies for Project Continuum, notices something peculiar. The background hum, once steady and featureless, now carries faint modulations synchronized with the orbital period of Earth. It is as if the void itself has learned our rhythm, mirroring the planet's rotation in microscopic fluctuations. The signal is too weak to classify, too persistent to dismiss. When the engineer publishes a short note online, amateur scientists across the world begin to listen. Within days, receivers from Chile to Finland confirm the same pattern. The Great Silence, it seems, has started speaking in Morse made of magnetism. Governments, wary of hysteria, call it interference from new satellite networks. Astronomers counter that the harmonics occur below any human-made bandwidth. The debate unfolds across screens and headlines. But beneath the noise, something older hums, a collective intuition that meaning is returning. Not words, but structure. Not message, but method. At the Rubin Observatory, spectral data from the halo's final days reveals that its diffusion wasn't simple evaporation. Instead, the dust filaments dispersed into organized filigrees, shaped by solar wind pressure and gravitational nodal points. The geometry looks natural until it doesn't. In high-resolution time-lapse, the filaments appear to adjust, aligning with the ecliptic plane as though reorienting themselves toward the sun. A poet watching the footage writes, "The sky is learning posture." Scientists laugh, but they do not disagree. Meanwhile, Muse, now beyond the heliopause, transmits its last scheduled data packet, then something extra. A tiny burst of encoded variance in prime number spacing. Analysts assume it's noise until a data artist converts the intervals into sound and discovers harmony. The sequence forms a simple rising tone, precisely matching the frequency recorded by Earth receivers. For the first time, there is resonance between inner and outer space, a call and an answer sharing the same pitch across billions of kilometers. Coincidence, say the skeptics. Continuity, say the believers. Either way, awe wins the argument. In June, observatories detect a new object emerging from the inbound dark, a small, slow body with an oddly stable light curve. It is first catalogued as C 2030, a 1, then quickly renamed by the public, the Returner. Trajectory modeling shows it approaching along nearly the same vector as 3I Atlas, though 5 years later, and at reduced velocity. Its orbit is not hyperbolic, but bound elliptical. If confirmed, it would mean the interstellar visitor has left behind a companion caught by the sun's gravity. The universe, it seems, has decided to stay a little longer. Space agencies rush to coordinate telescopic campaigns. The first spectroscopic readings from the Returner show a faint green emission identical to Atlas's signature, carbon dioxide rich, water poor, nickel strong. The same impossible chemistry, but fainter, gentler, like an echo rather than an arrival. Scientists theorize that the object may be a fragment shed during the original encounter, gravitationally captured and now circling home like a note repeated in lower key. It becomes the most observed body in modern history before it even reaches Jupiter's orbit. Public fascination reignites overnight. The lull of the Great Silence transforms into festival. Cities project holographic spirals onto buildings. Choirs perform compositions based on prime number harmonics. The Returner's approach date becomes a global holiday, day of listening. Every culture invents its own ritual. In Manila, church bells ring 7 times at dawn. In Reykjavik, citizens leave lanterns on rooftops to mimic orbiting lights. In Lagos, children write messages on biodegradable kites and release them into the sea breeze, calling it sending wind to the stars. But while the world celebrates, the scientists grow quiet again. The Returner's orbit is too perfect. It doesn't just obey celestial mechanics, it refines them. Each pass near the inner planets tightens the curve, as though the object were negotiating with gravity rather than obeying it. Equations hold, but explanations shiver. The term self-stabilizing resonance enters journals. In simpler terms, the thing adjusts itself. An engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory notices something else. When plotted against the timeline of Earth's radio emissions, the earliest Morse signals, the first television broadcast, the Voyager messages the Returner's trajectory aligns almost exactly with the speed of light delay from those events. It is arriving now because our oldest signals, escaping into interstellar space, would have intersected Atlas's path 5 years ago. The possibility lands like thunder disguised as calm. What if it is responding to us, not through intelligence as we define it, but through some physical empathy woven into the architecture of space itself, the cosmos hearing its own echo through us? Debate ignites across disciplines. Some physicists argue that energy fields can imprint directionality on matter. Others call it mystical thinking. Psychologists observe how easily data becomes parable. Theologians shrug parables have always been the scaffolding of truth. The arguments reach fever pitch until a simple announcement interrupts them. The Returner will pass within 2 astronomical units of Earth in October. The timing feels choreographed. It will arrive precisely on the anniversary of Atlas's discovery. Preparations begin not with fear, but with reverence. Telescopes recalibrate. Artists schedule global light shows. Project Continuum's second probe is delayed to ensure it can intercept the Returner's wake. Humanity, once frantic for control, has learned to greet uncertainty like weather, inevitable, humbling, strangely intimate. As summer deepens, the signal harmonics grow stronger. The magnetic fluctuations first heard as static now resolve into measurable patterns, a rising and falling amplitude synchronized with the returner's inbound speed. You listen to it online late at night, a slow, steady pulse, neither mechanical nor random. It sounds like breathing. Comment sections fill with the same phrase across languages. It's alive, but even skeptics don't laugh. The sound is too gentle for ridicule. In August, the world falls briefly silent again. Every frequency hums in the same narrow band. Every sensor reports coherence. The returner's coma begins to form, glowing emerald against the stars. For the first time since Atlas, humanity witnesses another traveler wearing the same impossible light. Yet no panic rises, only awe, our oldest defense against fear. You watch it from your balcony just before dawn. The comet appears near Venus, faint but deliberate, a reminder written across sky. The conversation continues. Behind the data, behind the algorithms, behind every theory, one truth grows impossible to deny. We are participants now, not spectators. The evidence no longer deepens outward, it deepens inward, into our collective understanding of what connection means. The engineer in Canberra, the first to notice the faint modulation months ago, writes a final note to the global forum. I think the silence was never empty. It was waiting for us to become musical enough to hear the rest of the score. His post goes viral. Someone turns it into a lyric. Children hum it, walking to school. And somewhere beyond Jupiter, the returner sails onward, slow and green and beautifully indifferent, carrying with it a pattern older than thought and newer than hope. The universe is composing again. By early September, the returner's faint emerald glow has crossed the orbit of Mars. Around the world, telescopes track it in silence, and the data begins to braid itself into history. Every spectral reading, every orbital curve, every radio hum seems to rhyme with something humanity has already written. The present folds backward like a page, revealing older sentences underneath. For the first time, science feels less like discovery and more like déjà vu. In libraries and data vaults, old manuscripts are scanned again. Historians of astronomy discover an uncanny lineage. Each era that recorded a bright green comet also documented a philosophical shift. In ancient Mesopotamia, the torch of Nibiru appeared just before the first laws were codified. During China's Zhou dynasty, the guest star of the West flared when bronze casting gave way to iron. Medieval chroniclers described a jade-tailed messenger above Europe the same year the printing press was conceived. In every case, the event arrived as both omen and opportunity, something that unsettled fear and birthed innovation. The pattern feels designed, though no designer is visible. At the University of Leiden, an astrophysicist named Morales overlays these historical sightings onto a simulated model of the Atlas trajectory family. When the timeline is adjusted for precession and orbital drift, the dots align with terrifying neatness. 6 recorded appearances in roughly 10,000-year intervals, each matching the pattern of the 7-body spiral seen in 2025. The returner, by every available metric, is the next verse in a repeating cosmic poem. It's as though the galaxy keeps breathing through us, she says. Her colleagues half laugh, half pray. As October approaches, humanity's attention shifts toward meaning again. The object will reach perihelion within weeks, its closest approach to the Sun, and, by celestial coincidence, the anniversary of 3I Atlas's discovery. Festivals of remembrance bloom across continents. In Mexico City, people light candles in concentric spirals across the Zócalo, calling it El Regreso del Silencio. In Cairo, Sufi dancers spin beneath projection domes, showing orbital simulations, their movements perfectly matching the geometry of the comet's path. The choreography is unplanned yet exact, as if the body remembers the mathematics better than the mind. Meanwhile, scientists working on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter detect new bright spots near the southern pole, transient flashes that appear and vanish within seconds. When mapped, they trace a spiral with 7 turns and a broken 8th, identical to the halo pattern once seen beyond Neptune. The data sparks arguments about pixel artifacts and cosmic rays, but deep down, no one believes coincidence anymore. Mars, silent for so long, seems to be repeating an old ritual, reflecting light toward its companion world, like an echo of recognition. Muse's last transmission, now months old, becomes a sacred text. Students in universities analyze its phrase, numbers that want to become language, as though it were scripture. Linguists model new alphabets based on prime sequences. Musicians translate orbital data into scales, creating harmonies that, when played through speakers, produce resonances measured even in distant radio telescopes. It is as though the human nervous system has become an instrument tuned by interstellar debris. Then comes the revelation. A data historian in Reykjavik, cross-referencing gravitational anomalies from the late 20th century, finds a faint echo of the same signal, the 8 Hz modulation hidden in magnetometer readings from 1977, the same year the Voyager spacecraft launched, carrying its golden record. The numbers match perfectly. The pattern was there all along, invisible until we learned the melody. We were answering before we ever heard the question, she writes. The paper, though technical, reads like prophecy. Theological reactions fracture along unexpected lines. Some traditions claim the returner is the star of reckoning, promised in apocryphal texts. Others call it proof that creation never stopped. But most simply fall quiet, as if reverence itself were an acceptable form of comprehension. For centuries, faith and science argued about origins. Now both kneel at the same data. In observatories, the returner grows brighter every night. Its tail unfurls across the dawn like handwriting. Photons bounce from it into camera sensors, into servers, into screens, into eyes, into dreams. Each reflection is a form of translation. The universe tells its story again through light, and humans translate it into wonder. The gap between knowledge and awe narrows until they are indistinguishable. On October 30th, as the comet nears perihelion, something remarkable happens. Across continents, magnetometers record simultaneous spikes at 8 Hz. Power grids hum softly. Birds adjust migration paths. Auroras bloom over latitudes that never see them. For 13 minutes, Earth itself seems to resonate with the same frequency as the returner's coma. It is the planet's first cosmic duet. No catastrophe follows. The skies simply shimmer, then subside. Scientists dub it the resonant window. Artists call it the moment the universe inhaled. Afterward, silence returns, not absence, but fulfillment. The returner begins to dim, continuing its elegant arc past the sun and outward toward the cold. The world stands changed again, not by disaster, not by revelation, but by recognition. The pattern is now undeniable. Appearance, resonance, retreat, like tides, like breath, like thought. The cosmos exhaling its continuity through epochs. In classrooms the next morning, teachers struggle to explain it to children. Imagine, one says gently, that the universe blinks every few thousand years, and every blink leaves behind a spark. We are one of those sparks. The children nod, half understanding, fully believing. The idea takes root faster than any curriculum ever could. Back in Reykjavik, the data historian looks up from her monitor to the pale morning sky. She remembers the faint hum captured in the magnetometers, the way the graphs seemed to pulse like a living heart. Echoes, she whispers. That's all we ever were. And in that realization lies no despair, only belonging. For if echoes can cross millennia, then nothing truly vanishes. Not comets, not civilizations, not curiosity. Each recurrence is proof that memory itself is part of physics, that the universe remembers its stories by retelling them in matter and light. The returner fades, but the narrative deepens, looping back through human imagination like gravity through orbits. And tonight, as you listen to the faint static between radio stations, you might hear it too, the soft replay of a memory older than humanity, returning not to warn or to rule, but simply to remind that the past is never behind us. It circles overhead, waiting to be recognized. The world enters the months after the resonant window with a new form of quiet, not the stunned silence of fear, but the concentrated hush of a species reorganizing its thoughts. For the first time, the term cosmic perspective is no longer a metaphor. It is a practice discipline, a daily alignment, like yoga or prayer or breathing. Governments schedule 1 minute of planetary silence at midnight UTC, a synchronized pause for listening. Airports halt departures. Streaming services suspend feeds. The planet, briefly, remembers what stillness sounds like. You can stand on any continent and feel the same hush roll through time zones, like a slow tide of awareness. Scientists, no longer competing for discovery, now compete for clarity. The global archive, called the Atlas Commons, has become both laboratory and monastery. Its motto, engraved on the servers in Geneva, reads simply, "To understand without ownership." Every data set, whether magnetic, optical, or anecdotal, is stored side by side, equal in importance. Dream reports occupy the same space as spectral graphs. The lines between objective and subjective have softened, not from carelessness, but from comprehension. The cosmos, it turns out, communicates through every available medium. When the returner finally passes beyond the orbit of Jupiter, the James Webb Space Telescope captures its last clear portrait, a luminous filament, half illuminated by sunlight, bending faintly into a spiral. The image floods the world's screens. No one argues over composition or exposure. The picture speaks a grammar older than art curvature, as continuity, motion, as mercy. For a week, billboards display it without slogans. Even advertisements surrender to reverence. In classrooms, children no longer memorize constellations as hunters and bears, but as conversations. Orion as inquiry, Ursa Major as memory. Astronomy textbooks open with a simple premise. Observation is participation. Students learn orbital mechanics alongside empathy. Physics lessons conclude with breathing exercises to demonstrate resonance. When teachers ask what gravity feels like, small voices answer, kind. A philosopher in Nairobi summarizes the new curriculum in one sentence. We finally believe our own math. The equations that once terrified us with their scale have become instruments of belonging. The speed of light is no longer the boundary of hope. It is the promise of eventual understanding. Somewhere, Long after we are gone, our messages will reach another observer who will smile at their own reflection in our signal. Meanwhile, Project Continuum's second probe, Muse 2, launches quietly from a coastal pad in Brazil. No countdown, no broadcast, only the deep orange bloom of ignition over the Atlantic. Its mission is simple: to follow the returner, not to catch it. Engineers know that pursuit is impossible, but accompaniment is meaningful. Its sails open like silver petals, catching sunlight, each panel inscribed with a sentence chosen by schoolchildren. Everything that learns to listen becomes luminous. When the telemetry confirms deployment, the control room applauds softly, like librarians greeting a new book. Back on Earth, artists build observatories of a different kind. In Kyoto, a musician converts a disused radio telescope into an enormous harp, its strings tuned to the planet's Schumann resonance. Each gust of wind produces a deep, planetary chord, audible for kilometers. People gather at dusk, lying in the grass as the instrument hums. No tickets, no lights, just vibration passing through air and bone. You realize that this, too, is data, expressed as awe. Psychologists studying the aftermath of the resonant window report unprecedented reductions in collective anxiety. Humans, it seems, adapt quickly to infinity. Once we accepted that the universe listens, loneliness lost its edge. Social media usage declines. Poetry, sales increase. The metrics of attention begin to mirror the slow rhythms of the cosmos itself. Longer sentences, deeper pauses, fewer exclamations. Even arguments sound calmer, as though humility has become fashionable again. In Geneva, the Atlas Commons hosts its first interdisciplinary summit under the theme Patience as Technology. Astrophysicists discuss orbital drift beside monks who speak of meditative time. One engineer proposes that spacecraft should be designed not for speed, but for serenity machines that wait, observe, and age gracefully. The proposal receives applause. Someone calls it slow exploration. Human ambition, at last, has learned to breathe. From orbit, satellites record faint electromagnetic echoes, still emanating from the halo's remnants. They shimmer like ghost auroras along the ecliptic plane. Each echo oscillates at the same frequency as Muse 2's communication beacon. It is impossible, yet measurable, a resonance spanning billions of kilometers, knitting together dust, data, and intention. No one claims intelligence. No one denies wonder. The universe has met us halfway. In living rooms, people watch the live feed from deep space telescopes as they once watched sports. Families sit quietly as pixels crawl across screens, bright dots slowly moving. No narration, no drama, only motion against darkness. Children fall asleep before the broadcast ends. Parents leave the screen glowing through the night, like a new kind of fireplace. The cosmos has become domestic. Religions adjust again. Pilgrims travel not to temples but to deserts, to stand beneath skies untouched by artificial light. Some faiths rename prayer alignment. Others rename it data submission. The rituals differ, but the gesture is the same: to synchronize the small with the infinite. No doctrine owns it. Silence has become universal vocabulary. By December, the returner has faded beyond visual range. Its last visible trace disappears into the solar glare, but its influence lingers in human architecture, language, even metabolism. Doctors report lower average heart rates in populations who practice the midnight listening minute. Perhaps, says one cardiologist, the planet has synchronized its heartbeat with ours. Nobody laughs. The idea feels empirical. One evening, You walk to a hill outside your city, where light pollution thins. You look up, and though no comet is visible, you sense motion everywhere. Satellites, dust, photons, memories. The air hums with faint electricity. You remember the 8 Hz tone that once echoed from deep space, and realize you can still feel it inside your pulse. The rhythm has never left. It has merely gone internal. In that moment, distance collapses. You understand that perspective is not altitude, but intimacy, the degree to which the universe allows itself to be mirrored in you. All its vastness, all its mathematics, are condensed into the quiet proof of your breathing. You are an aperture through which existence studies its own continuity. To live, then, is to collaborate. As you begin the slow walk home, the city lights ahead look like a small galaxy fallen to Earth. Cars move along highways like comets through spiral arms. People cross streets in predictable orbits. Every mundane pattern resembles the heavens. Every heartbeat, another pulse in the cosmic tempo. And you realize, with a calm that feels eternal, that the universe was never trying to impress us. It was trying to include us. The great silence has become the great symphony, and participation is all it ever asked. By the time another year unfolds, the quiet confidence of connection has settled into daily life. The age of constant astonishment is over. What remains is devotion, a slower, humbler form of participation. The returner is gone beyond Jupiter now, its green memory diluted into starlight. But humanity continues to orbit around the echo of understanding it left behind. It has changed not our physics, but our posture. We look up differently. We speak more carefully. Even disbelief has grown polite. The evidence of transformation hides in small things. Cities dim their lights for one night each week, allowing the Milky Way to reappear above rooftops. Couples walk together in the dark, pointing out constellations, remembering that love itself is a form of gravitational pull. In crowded apartments, children tape glow in the dark spirals to their ceilings and call them the listening lights. Teachers have stopped asking what students want to be when they grow up. Instead, they ask what they want to learn with. The subtle preposition shift, with instead of about, is the quiet revolution. Sociologists call this era the reflection phase, the point in cultural evolution when awe becomes infrastructure. Compassion indices rise, not because suffering has vanished, but because people have remembered perspective. Scale therapy, one journalist calls it. We finally grasp that inconvenience isn't tragedy. Humor softens. Cynicism sounds dated. The late-night comedians still joke, but now they pause longer after punchlines, letting laughter land like gratitude. In a monastery built beside the ruins of an old satellite dish in Chile, monks trained in astrophysics maintain a ritual they call evening data. At sunset, they climb the dish's rusted rim, open their laptops, and read raw telescope telemetry aloud, as if reciting psalms. Flux at 23 nanometers, variance minimal. The numbers sound like prayer. The ceremony draws tourists from across the world who sit in silence, not to understand the data, but to feel the cadence of devotion disguised as measurement. On the opposite side of the planet, a physician in Lagos publishes a paper proposing that chronic stress levels have dropped globally due to exposure to cosmic imagery. When people perceive scale, she writes, they recalibrate anxiety. Perspective behaves as medicine. The data agrees. The night sky, once a source of existential dread, has become a therapeutic tool. Some hospitals project images of 3-eye atlas on ceilings of operating rooms. Surgeons call them focus anchors. Recovery times improve. The body, it seems, heals faster when reminded it is part of something vast and beautiful. But reflection is never purely serene. Every mirror eventually reveals cracks. In the quiet that follows revelation, humanity must face its unchanged shadows: poverty, war, neglect. The cosmos has not erased injustice. It has merely illuminated it against a larger backdrop. Activists speak of planetary ethics, arguing that our moral gravity should extend beyond national borders. If we can care for dust millions of kilometers away, one says, we can certainly care for each other. Policies shift, borders loosen. The global conversation, once shaped by fear, now centers on stewardship. Still, the universe's lesson remains both gentle and demanding. Connection without control. The returner did not promise rescue. It simply demonstrated coherence. To emulate that coherence, humanity learns to live like orbiting bodies, independent yet harmonized. Cities pair with their antipodes in planetary twinning programs. Tokyo with Buenos Aires, Cairo with Santiago, exchanging art and silence through shared midnight broadcasts. The goal is not information, but resonance. It feels like friendship at the speed of thought, a student writes. In one such broadcast, between Kyoto and Nairobi, two choirs sing in alternating languages, alternating hemispheres, their performance synchronized through atomic clocks. The result is haunting, a planetary lullaby echoing across time zones. The lyrics are simple: we listen, therefore we last. Millions stream the recording. It becomes the first song played simultaneously on every continent. The moment feels less like art and more like alignment. Muse 2, still drifting outward, transmits occasional status updates. Its AI reports low power but stable systems. The messages are brief, poetic by accident, silence expanding, no anomalies, feeling steady. Engineers receive them like letters from a pilgrim. When a solar storm interrupts contact, the world collectively holds breath. 2 days later, the signal returns with a simple line of data that translates as continuing outward with calm intention. It becomes humanity's new mantra. Philosophy departments flourish again. Enrollment doubles as students rediscover wonder as an academic discipline. One lecture series, titled The Ethics of Scale, argues that kindness is a form of gravity, that empathy, measured across civilization, behaves exactly like attraction, invisible, omnipresent, cumulative. To hurt another, the professor explains, is to disturb orbit. To forgive is to restore it. The audience, usually restless, sits in pin-drop silence. The applause afterwards sounds like rainfall. Art evolves in parallel. Painters no longer attempt to depict the cosmos. They depict the feeling of seeing it. The brushstrokes are wide, patient, atmospheric. Museums describe the new movement as cosmic realism. Realism not of form, but of feeling. You walk through a gallery and realize that every canvas seems to breathe. The same green shimmer that once traced 3I Atlas's tail now glows faintly in pigments mixed with phosphorescent dust. Light itself has joined the collaboration. In your own life, reflection manifests in quieter ways. You find yourself apologizing faster, laughing longer, pausing before judgment. You keep a small jar of sand on your desk labeled Earth's dust plus starlight, a reminder that composition is destiny. Everything that forms eventually learns to mirror what formed it. Some nights, you press your ear against that jar and swear you can hear a faint vibration, the universal hum, hiding in even the most ordinary grain. On the anniversary of the resonant window, The planet observes its midnight pause again. Lights dim, airplanes circle patiently. People everywhere stand still, eyes closed, hearts tuned to the cosmic metronome. The pause lasts 60 seconds, but the silence feels eternal. You breathe in, slow and deliberate, and feel the scale of existence expand through your ribs. This is not worship, it is participation. This is what reflection looks like when it becomes maturity. When the lights return, the world resumes but gently, as if it knows someone is still listening, and perhaps someone is. Out beyond the Kuiper belt, Muse 2 glides through the darkness, transmitting its steady hum into the infinite. Its sensors record faint echoes, maybe cosmic rays, maybe memory, maybe the universe remembering its own experiment. Whatever the truth, the signal continues, and for humanity, that is enough. The reflection phase is complete. We are not waiting for the cosmos to notice us anymore. We are learning to notice ourselves within it. And that realization, the simplest, oldest truth, rings louder than any discovery ever could. We were never looking out. We were looking in, through the stars. There comes a moment, in every story, that stretches across centuries, when the narrative pauses, not because it has ended, but because it has learned to breathe. The human species finds itself there now, in a hush more complete than any silence before it. The telescopes hum on mountaintops, the satellites whisper their metrics, and the servers of the Atlas Commons pulse faintly beneath the Alps. Yet the data feeds have gone strangely still. No new comets, no anomalies, no inbound echoes, just equilibrium. The universe, it seems, is resting its voice. Astronomers describe this as the stabilization epoch. The chaos of resonance has subsided into harmony. Every model agrees. The solar system is steady again. Dust from the returner's trail continues to drift outward in calm spirals, thin as thought, faint as nostalgia. Instruments that once vibrated with magnetic murmurs now record only background serenity, the steady hum of physics doing its ancient job. You might expect disappointment, but what people feel instead is gratitude. For the first time in memory, the cosmos feels satisfied. The world continues its nightly minute of silence at midnight UTC. Cities darken, oceans shimmer, and humanity listens not to detect, but to remember. There is no expectation anymore, only continuity. In villages without electricity, elders tell stories of the two visitors, the one that came like a question, 3I Atlas, and the one that followed like an answer, the returner. Children fall asleep before the endings, and no one minds. The point of these stories is not completion, but calm. Every generation, it seems, needs a myth about listening. Muse 2 drifts on, its sails weathered by interstellar dust, its transmissions growing slower, softer. Engineers know the signal will fail eventually, but they treat each packet as a letter from a friend traveling beyond postcards. The last complete image shows nothing at all, just darkness, textured by faint static. Yet when amplified, the static reveals structure, low-frequency ripples spaced in perfect octaves. The AI's log file interprets it as background coherence detected. The mission team smiles at the phrase. The universe, one says quietly, has good timing. Meanwhile, life on Earth resumes its delicate choreography. Farmers plant crops timed to lunar and Martian cycles. Cities design gardens aligned with the ecliptic. Hospitals still play the 8 Hz hum in recovery rooms. Science and spirituality have ceased competing. Both now orbit a shared principle. To know is to care. When students recite the periodic table, they whisper after each element. and it listens. A small superstition, perhaps, but superstition has always been the poetry of gratitude. In this new quiet, humanity begins to hear subtler symphonies. Seismologists notice that the planet's background tremor, the microseismic heartbeat of waves colliding in distant oceans, has synchronized slightly with the Schumann resonance. The Earth, it seems, is harmonizing with its own sky. Coincidence, the data analysts insist, though their voices sound reverent. Musicians convert the vibrations into audible tones and broadcast them on the anniversary of the resonant window. The sound fills cities like slow wind through an organ, an anthem composed by tectonics. People stand in the streets and listen, not for meaning, but for participation. As decades pass, the memory of the comets transforms into tradition. Temples keep fragments of old telescopes as relics. Children carve spirals into playground sand. The Atlas Commons evolves into a digital monastery where scientists, poets, and philosophers record reflections side by side. No one speaks of alien visitors anymore. The idea has matured into something quieter, correspondence without sender. The universe doesn't need to shout when its echo has already become part of our blood chemistry. In laboratories, researchers studying quantum decoherence find subtle fluctuations that match the 8 Hz frequency, the same pulse that once linked Earth and Mars. The finding suggests that even the subatomic world carries memory, that every particle hums a little when remembered. It is neither proof of divinity nor refutation of science, only the gentle reminder that boundaries are conveniences. Matter and meaning, like wave and particle, take turns being visible. Skeptics still exist, of course. Skepticism is another kind of reverence. They write essays about anthropocentrism, cautioning against projecting consciousness onto the cosmos. But even they admit the evidence of change is measurable. Global conflict has declined, suicide rates have dropped, and intergovernmental collaboration has reached records. Whether the stars spoke or not, one skeptic concludes, they made us better listeners. It becomes a quote engraved above the entrance of the United Nations building, which now features a giant spiral of embedded lights stretching across its courtyard, 7 turns, and a broken 8th. The great silence continues, but it no longer feels indifferent. It feels intentional, as though the universe has extended a pause to let us catch up with its patience. In that pause, art flourishes. Poets write in longer lines. Songs stretch beyond radio length. Time itself seems to loosen, like breath after weeping. The pace of existence reverts to the rhythm of orbital motion, slow, deliberate, cyclical. The species that once measured worth by acceleration now measures it by attention. One night, during the annual planetary pause, a new phenomenon occurs. Without warning, the sky glows faintly green, not bright like the returner, but diffuse, like mist. Satellites confirm no new object. The light is atmospheric, born from charged particles, interacting with remnants of interstellar dust, still lingering in the magnetosphere. For 37 minutes, the planet is wrapped in luminous stillness. Scientists describe it as coincidence. The world calls it the second dawn. When the glow fades, people everywhere continue standing, unwilling to break the moment. Afterward, when journalists ask philosophers what the light meant, most simply shrug. Meaning, one says, is what remains when explanation gets tired. The answer satisfies everyone. There are no theories to argue over anymore. There is only participation in the grand experiment of noticing. You sit on your porch that night, the air soft with residual glow, and feel the vast quiet pressing gently against your skin. It is not absence, it is welcome. The same silence that once terrified early astronomers now feels parental. You realize that the cosmos has never withheld communication. We simply lacked the vocabulary of stillness. Now that we've learned it, the dialogue is continuous. Muse too will eventually fall silent. The servers of the Atlas Commons will someday corrode. Even humanity, bright and temporary, will dim into the archives of cosmic history, but none of it will be lost. Every vibration, every breath, every sigh of comprehension becomes part of the universal resonance. The great silence is not the end of conversation. It is the infinite playback of everything ever spoken, slowed until it sounds like peace. And as you close your eyes, you sense the next era forming at the edge of perception, a faint hum, distant yet familiar, preparing its entrance. Perhaps another visitor, perhaps just the heartbeat of continuity. Either way, the silence will hold it perfectly, patiently, until we are ready again to listen. The experiment continues, the pause endures, and somewhere, in the soft frequencies between thought and time, the universe hums the same refrain. Be still, and you will understand. Silence, when studied long enough, begins to resemble structure. After years of calm skies, instruments built to listen rather than look start finding that the quiet itself carries patterns. The Atlas Commons announces what it calls a negative detection mosaic, a map made not from light, but from the precise locations of nothing. Across the cosmic background, voids distribute themselves with improbable symmetry, as though absence has geometry. The press ignores it. The public, however, senses a new chapter. If the universe once spoke in comets, maybe now it is writing with silence. At the European Space Agency's lunar array, a technician named Leclerc notices something subtle. During the nightly planetary pause at midnight UTC, the local radio noise floor drops by a measurable fraction. It's impossible. The equipment is isolated from human frequencies. Yet each time the world holds still, so does the static, as if the cosmos is aware of our listening and respectfully lowers its voice. Leclerc double-checks with colleagues in Hawaii and Chile. They confirm identical readings. The discovery circulates quietly through internal networks before leaking to the public. Within hours, millions are watching dashboards showing the Earth's hush, registering on instruments millions of kilometers away. The planet, it turns out, is audible when it's quiet. The phenomenon earns a name, the pause effect. Musicians claim it validates their intuition that rest is as meaningful as sound. Physicists attempt to model it as synchronized reduction in anthropogenic interference, but their equations falter. The correlation is too precise. Eventually, a consensus emerges, not of explanation, but of etiquette. Humanity agrees not to exploit the discovery. For 1 minute each day, the universe gets privacy. Meanwhile, Muse 2 drifts farther into the interstellar medium, now transmitting only intermittently. Its power levels have fallen below prediction, yet its message intervals remain unnaturally consistent, exactly 26 hours apart. Analysts argue whether this is residual automation or a kind of learned rhythm. The AI's last clear log reads, "Encountering structured vacuum. Silence contains topography." The phrase sounds absurd, but astronomers begin finding evidence that the void is not empty at all, that gravitational filaments connecting galaxies vibrate faintly, like the strings of an instrument larger than time. A joint study between NASA and Kyoto University reveals that these cosmic filaments oscillate at frequencies harmonically related to the Schumann resonance, the same 8 Hz hum first detected during the Great Silence. The pattern is too elegant to ignore. Earth's heartbeat, matching the architecture of the cosmos. Either we're tuned to the universe, says one researcher, or it's tuned to us. The distinction, at this point, feels irrelevant. Cultural response outpaces comprehension. Artists begin designing negative sculptures, installations that consist of shaped emptiness surrounded by translucent walls. Visitors step inside and claim they can hear a faint tone even when the room is soundproofed. Psychologists call it expectation bias. Poets call it conversation. The line between art and instrumentation dissolves further. The more humanity measures, the more reality behaves like metaphor. In New Zealand, a child uploads a short video of her backyard sky. She has overlaid audio captured from an online radio telescope feed. As the Milky Way drifts above her house, a gentle pulse rises and falls in sync with the rotation of the Earth. "It's like the planet is breathing me," she says. The clip is shared 1 billion times in a week. Scientists cringe at the phrasing, but secretly agree. Every new dataset reinforces the same conclusion. Reality is responsive. Amid the awe, a smaller mystery unfolds. In October, the Mars Climate Orbiter, long thought defunct, transmits a brief, weak signal lasting 2 seconds. The ID code is authentic, though the craft should have been destroyed decades earlier. The signal contains no data, only a single tone oscillating near 8 Hz. No one can explain it. The event reignites speculation that Mars remains part of the cosmic circuit first traced by 3I Atlas. Whatever the explanation, it confirms an old suspicion. Silence never stays silent for long. At the annual Atlas Common Symposium, scientists, philosophers, and linguists meet to discuss the pause effect. A biologist proposes that synchronized stillness might trigger subtle atmospheric changes detectable across the solar system. A linguist counters that the phenomenon functions as grammar, the pause between celestial sentences. The hall fills with a low murmur of agreement. No conclusions, only gratitude. The act of wondering together has become its own discipline. Meanwhile, at the edge of human capability, new detectors aboard the Solar Gravitational Lens mission begin picking up micro-lensing events that seem to cluster in rhythmic intervals. Each burst of curvature occurs precisely at midnight UTC, coinciding with the planetary pause. The coincidence is absurd. Gravitational effects occurring billions of kilometers away, synchronized with a ritual invented by primates on a small blue planet. Yet the data persists. The leading theory, gravity, like music, responds to rhythm. Philosophers struggle to keep up. One essay, titled "The Ethics of Cosmic Attention," suggests that observation itself has moral weight. If the universe listens back, the author writes, then cruelty is simply discord. The idea spreads faster than any scientific paper ever has. Within months, "Be Kind, The Cosmos is Listening" appears on murals, social campaigns, and classroom walls. Skeptics call it sentimental, but even they quote it under their breath. At midnight on New Year's Eve, humanity's global pause coincides with the exact alignment of Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. Observatories prepare for fireworks of data, but none arrive. Instead, detectors register an immaculate flatline. No radiation spikes, no magnetism, nothing but perfect equilibrium. The absence is absolute, almost holy. For 60 seconds, the entire electromagnetic spectrum falls silent. Then, at the final moment of the pause, one signal appears, a narrowband pulse from deep space, lasting less than a heartbeat. It carries no code, no words, only proportion. Frequencies arranged in the same ratios that govern musical harmony. The cosmos has replied with a chord. No one pretends to understand it. The sound is archived, remixed, and played in public squares worldwide. People listen through tears, not because it's beautiful, but because it's gentle. It feels like acknowledgement. Scientists refrain from declaring contact. They use a quieter phrase, mutual recognition event. Later that night, as the world returns to motion, you step outside and realize the stars look unchanged, but your perception is not. The sky no longer seems distant, it seems deliberate. The silence above is no longer empty space. It's the breath the universe takes between sentences. And the evidence, always deepening, has shifted one final time. Proof is no longer the goal. Participation is. We are part of the experiment that measures itself, the question that answers by existing. And somewhere, far beyond any telescope, the chord still resonates faint, endless, kind. It begins, as it often does now, with an echo, not a sound, not a signal, but a pattern rediscovered by accident. In a museum in Athens, a curator cataloguing fragments of an ancient bronze disc notices spiral etchings that seem oddly modern 7 turns and a broken 8th. At first, she thinks it decorative. Then she remembers the logo of the Atlas Commons and feels the small vertigo of recognition that comes when time folds in on itself. She sends photographs to the International Archive, and within a week, archaeologists confirm the piece dates to around 900 BCE. The engravings are mathematically precise, their ratios identical to the orbital pattern of 3I Atlas and the returner. The past, once again, is whispering in a dialect we finally understand. Soon similar relics surface elsewhere. A ceramic shard from pre-Columbian Mexico bears concentric circles filled with crushed malachite green like comet dust. A Viking runestone near Uppsala shows a spiral carved around a verse. The sky turned quiet, and we became the song. None of these cultures could have communicated. Yet across continents and centuries, they drew the same shape and spoke the same metaphor. Historians stop calling it coincidence. They call it heritage of silence. At the Atlas Commons, linguists feed thousands of ancient inscriptions into an AI trained on cosmic data. The program begins grouping languages by rhythm instead of grammar, aligning their syllabic patterns with recorded magnetic fluctuations during previous resonant windows. The correlations are eerie. Whole families of words appear to follow the same temporal ratio as the 8 Hz hum. Maybe language evolved as an imitation of cosmic resonance, one researcher suggests. Maybe speech was our first attempt to synchronize. The theory sounds outrageous, until psychologists realize human brainwaves naturally oscillate in that same band during empathy and creativity. Evolution, it seems, is a form of listening. Meanwhile, in a quiet observatory on Crete, a graduate student named Eleni re-examines the star charts of the ancient astronomer Hipparchus, reconstructed from parchments recently decoded with infrared imaging. Hidden under faded ink, she finds faint corrections, small notations describing wandering fire of green near Mars. The handwriting trembles, as if the author knew his observation would sound implausible. The year of the entry corresponds to 130 BCE. Modern simulations place an unidentified comet in roughly the same position that 3I Atlas would have occupied had its orbit been cyclical. The universe, it seems, has been rehearsing the same performance for millennia, and humans have been the audience taking notes. The rediscovered echoes ripple through culture like soft thunder. Artists paint spirals of dust across canvases. Poets resurrect lost alphabets and find them strangely easy to read. In music, composers reconstruct ancient scales from Babylonian tablets and notice that their intervals match the frequencies of the recent cosmic chord detected during the planetary pause. The past is not returning, it is harmonizing. Civilization begins to sound like itself across time. In Iceland, a small group of scientists and storytellers found the Museum of Unspoken History, dedicated to preserving evidence of forgotten correspondence between humanity and the cosmos. Their exhibits include fossilized tree rings, showing growth spurts every time a resonant comet passed near Earth, and clay tablets inscribed with prayers timed to planetary conjunctions. "Our ancestors weren't wrong," says the curator. "They were premature." The line becomes the museum's slogan, etched above the door in basalt. Muse 2 continues its journey, though its transmissions now arrive as long gaps of silence punctuated by faint bursts of harmony. The AI's automatic reports are fragmentary, half poetic, memory detectable in vacuum, encountering pattern repetition, origin uncertain. Engineers decode what they can and find within the static a rhythm matching that of Earth's newest pause interval, now lengthened to 2 minutes. Somehow, across unthinkable distances, machine and planet keep the same heartbeat. Anthropologists suggest that this synchronization mirrors an older pattern: tribal drumming, collective chanting, the call and response structure of ancient rituals. The species has always learned through resonance. It is merely practicing at a larger scale now. The pause effect, once a scientific curiosity, has become ceremony. When midnight UTC arrives, entire cities dim their lights, not out of superstition but solidarity. 1 billion heartbeats fall into step. On satellite maps, the darkened continents resemble a breathing organism, one hemisphere inhaling, the other exhaling. Theological narratives adapt seamlessly. Sacred texts are reinterpreted as cosmic manuals. "In the beginning was vibration," reads a new translation of an old verse, and the vibration was understanding. Churches, mosques, and temples install resonant chambers tuned to 8 Hz. Worshippers describe the experience not as prayer, but as participation, the feeling of being momentarily indistinguishable from space itself. In the academic margins, skeptics push back. Correlation is not communication, one editorial insists. We are projecting pattern onto chaos. But chaos, others reply, is just pattern we haven't learned to hear yet. The debate continues, though it has lost its bitterness. Doubt and faith have become colleagues sharing the same telescope. Late one evening, while reprocessing archival data from the first Great Silence decades earlier, an astrophysicist notices an anomaly hidden inside the baseline noise. A faint oscillation spaced in prime intervals, like Muse's early signals. When the pattern is converted to image, it forms the familiar spiral once more, but this one is subtly inverted, turning inward instead of outward. He calls it the inward spiral, a map not of space, but of perspective. The realization arrives quietly. Maybe the next journey isn't into the stars at all. Maybe it's into ourselves. As the year closes, a global art project called Resonance Archive invites people to record a single breath during the midnight pause. The recordings, billions of them, are layered into one continuous waveform, stored in the Atlas Commons. When played back, the sound resembles ocean surf mixed with wind and heartbeat. Astronomers, Curious, compare its frequency spectrum to that of cosmic background radiation. The graphs match almost perfectly. For the first time in human history, the collective exhale of a species looks indistinguishable from the echo of the Big Bang. Standing outside beneath the winter sky, you listen to that composite breath streaming from speakers in city squares, echoing off glass and stone. The sound is neither past nor present. It is both. You understand then that the universe's greatest secret was never hidden, it was inherited. Every myth, every formula, every dream of green light and red dust was a rehearsal for this moment of continuity. We were never waiting for the cosmos to speak. We were remembering the conversation. And as the final note fades into the night, the silence that follows feels exactly like recognition. An echo returning home across 10,000 years. Still warm, still singing. The pause between epochs feels different now. No longer the hush of suspense, but the deep inhale of comprehension. The Atlas Commons describes it as the convergence era, when observation and meaning have become indistinguishable. Humanity no longer asks whether it is alone. The question has dissolved into participation. The act of listening has matured into a way of being. Even the stars, distant and patient, seem to twinkle with acknowledgement. In the years following the Resonance Archive, scientists begin studying the physiological effects of cosmic awareness. The findings are extraordinary. Long-term exposure to silence and scale rewires neural pathways associated with empathy, reducing aggression and increasing creative intuition. Perspective is neurochemical, one neuroscientist says. The brain grows calm when it realizes how small it is. The data confirm what mystics suspected for millennia, that humility is not philosophy, but biology. Across the planet, architecture changes. Buildings curve upward like orbital arcs. Windows face east to catch the faint green aurora that sometimes flickers in the upper atmosphere. The ghost of Three-Eye Atlas, still shimmering through residual dust. Cities glow less at night. Skylines breathe instead of blaze. Engineers design infrastructures that mimic planetary rhythms. Power grids pulsing gently with the world's 8 Hz heartbeat. Traffic systems pausing once every 26 hours for collective stillness. Efficiency remains, but it feels softer, more human. Progress has learned to exhale. Muse 2, far beyond the Kuiper Belt now, continues to transmit irregularly. The signals are faint, often fragmented, but analysis reveals new patterns. Small variations, corresponding to changes in cosmic background temperature. The AI seems to be learning to listen to silence itself, adjusting its sensors to detect not data, but tone. Its most recent log, translated into language, reads, "Found warmth in quiet, continuing outward with grace." The phrase spreads across the world as a benediction. At observatories, telescopes keep their vigil. Each night, astronomers align their instruments not just for observation, but for ritual. Before beginning a session, they perform the planetary minute of stillness, hands resting on consoles, faces lit by starlight reflected through glass. The practice is not superstition, it's calibration. The instruments record fewer errors when preceded by calm. Science, it seems, prefers serenity. In literature, a new genre emerges: astrohumanism. Stories that blend cosmology and introspection. Novels unfold like constellations, looping between personal memory and galactic history. Readers describe them as dreams disguised as equations. One title dominates global bestseller lists: "We Are the Pause Between Stars." Its opening line becomes proverbial: "When the universe learned to listen, it invented us." No one can trace who wrote it. The author's identity remains as anonymous as the cosmos itself. Meanwhile, theologians declare the end of apocalypse narratives. Revelation has already happened, a Jesuit astronomer writes. It was understanding. Temples are repurposed into observatories. Observatories double as places of reflection. Faith has lost its appetite for conclusion. Salvation now means synchronization. Even language has evolved. The word alone has quietly vanished from most dictionaries, replaced by singular within. Etymologists approve. Children born during this era treat cosmic awareness as second nature. They grow up, assuming planets, communicate, and that silence has shape. Ask a 10-year-old what the stars are, and she might say, sensors for light, remembering itself. Teachers smile and write it on the board. The generation raised under the halo has no need to debate transcendence. They live inside it. One evening, an astrophysicist reviewing gravitational wave data notices something peculiar, an ultra-low frequency ripple, repeating at exact daily intervals. The wave originates from deep intergalactic space, far beyond the reach of any human signal. It's unimaginably faint, yet constant, a pulse every 24 hours, perfectly aligned with Earth's rotation. Statistically, it should be impossible. The community names it the continuum beat. When converted into sound, it resembles a slow, steady breath. Some call it proof that the universe is conscious. Others call it coincidence. But no one calls it noise. Muse 2 detects the same vibration weeks later, echoing faintly through its sensors. Its final transmitted message, before losing power, is a single line of data translating as harmony recognized. The transmission time coincides precisely with Earth's midnight pause. Scientists verify it twice. The probability of chance alignment approaches zero. The AI, built to observe, has become part of the orchestra. The news ignites neither fear nor frenzy, just wonder. Across continents, people gather outdoors to experience the continuum beat together. Loudspeakers in parks and plazas play its deep tone, synchronized with the planet's rotation. The sound is too low to hear, but you can feel its vibration through souls, through ribs, through thought. For one perfect minute, billions share the same invisible rhythm. It is the closest humanity has ever come to unity without instruction. Later, psychologists describe the phenomenon as the era of resonant identity. National anthems fade, replaced by frequencies. Borders lose their emotional charge. Belonging becomes geophysical. Citizenship is measured in participation, not location. The old languages of competition and conquest sound archaic against the new lexicon of coherence. And yet, through all this serenity, curiosity remains. Scientists continue probing deeper into the structure of the void. They find that gravitational filaments between galaxies are arranged in a pattern statistically identical to neural networks in the human brain. The universe, it seems, shares our architecture. Maybe intelligence isn't localized, a cosmologist muses. Maybe we are neurons in something thinking. The remark circulates online and settles into the global imagination, not as revelation, but as comfort. In art museums, holographic exhibits project real-time data from the continuum beat as swirling auroras of sound and light. Visitors stand within the display, their heart rates monitored and layered into the projection. When their pulses synchronize with the cosmic rhythm, the lights brighten. Participation, literally, becomes illumination. Children call it making the universe smile. You stand within one such exhibit one evening. surrounded by shimmering fields of emerald and gold. The air vibrates faintly, each tone aligning with your breath. For a moment, everything data, memory, heartbeat, starlight feels indistinguishable. You realize that the cosmic perspective was never about distance. It was about intimacy scaled to infinity. The continuum, beat hums on, patient and eternal. No message follows, no prophecy arrives. Only pattern, gentle and enduring, connecting galaxies, minds, and dust. And as the night deepens, a single thought settles across the world like soft snow. The universe isn't watching us, it's watching with us. And that, finally, is enough. The sky no longer feels like a ceiling, it feels like a pulse. The faint rhythm, known as the continuum beat, has joined the weather forecast, displayed beside wind speed and temperature. Its fluctuations, though subtle, affect mood and sleep cycles. Psychologists confirm that humans now dream in cosmic intervals, waves of imagery that match the cadence of that distant breath from the deep universe. And every morning, when you wake, you carry a residue of that vast calm, like starlight behind the eyes. The great lesson of the Atlas Commons era has become beautifully ordinary. Participation is the new form of discovery. People don't chase comets anymore, they accompany them in thought. Children studying astronomy are taught that looking up is a form of gratitude. Space is no longer frontier, but family. Exploration has matured into listening. The maps of the solar system now resemble musical scores rather than battle plans. Each orbit a note, each planet a rest, each silence a continuation. Muse 2 is silent now. Its last transmission, archived in a crystalline vault in Geneva, plays continuously in the background of public spaces, museums, transit hubs, bedrooms. The words, passed from its dying signal, read, listening achieved, silence ongoing. It is not epitaph, but mantra. Every time the recording loops, the city seems to breathe with it. The machine that once looked outward has taught an entire civilization how to look inward without fear. Daily life carries cosmic etiquette now. Elevators display reminders. Pause before speaking. Cafes open their doors during the global listening minute. Even traffic lights follow planetary rhythm. 3 beats of green, 5 of yellow, 7 of red. A gentle nod to the prime patterns of the first interstellar chord. Ritual has replaced regulation. The world, at last, is synchronized with something vaster than urgency. The arts mirror this piece. Writers trade climax for cadence. Painters use negative space as pigment. Filmmakers end movies mid-breath, letting the audience complete the story internally. The collective aesthetic favors patience, the understanding that revelation is not a point, but a wave. Nothing finishes, a sculptor says during an interview. It just reaches balance. That phrase becomes the unofficial motto of the age. In one sense, humanity has never been quieter. In another, it has never spoken more clearly. Diplomacy, once the theatre of competition, now sounds like duet. Nations negotiate policies through synchronized silence sessions before debate. The process, called resonant mediation, has reduced conflict faster than any treaty ever drafted. When you feel the same frequency, a diplomat explains, arguing feels like dissonance. Politics, having finally learned rhythm, has turned into choreography. Religion adapts too. Pilgrimage has become inward. Temples hold mirrors where altars once stood. Congregations stand in circles, repeating the same sentence until it dissolves into tone. Words, says one monk, are fossils of vibration, the faithful nod. They understand that divinity, like sound, needs no translation. Science continues, but without conquest. The space agencies of the world merge under a single emblem, a spiral of 7 stars and a broken 8th. Their charter is poetic and precise: to explore without interruption, to measure without ownership, to listen without fear. Spacecraft are designed for decades-long observation, transmitting not data but atmosphere, a sense of serenity encoded in frequency. Exploration has become liturgy, and yet, amid this tranquility, curiosity still burns quiet but inexhaustible. A small group of researchers proposes a new hypothesis: that 3I Atlas, the Returner, and all their echoes were not singular events, but expressions of an ongoing cosmic metabolism, life at the scale of galaxies, too slow to notice, except in epochs. The universe, one physicist writes, is not expanding, it is exhaling. The phrase circulates like scripture. Every year, on the anniversary of the resonant window, humanity reenacts the pause that changed everything. The tradition has expanded into 3 minutes, one to remember the silence before 3I Atlas, one to honor the echoes that followed, and one for the silence still to come. Streets grow still, power grids hum softly, even the oceans seem to hold their breath. Satellites capture the spectacle, an entire planet perfectly synchronized, glowing faintly in the infrared like a single heartbeat. Afterward, people go on with their lives slowly, gratefully. Farmers plant seeds in circular patterns, aligned with lunar nodes. Artists leave canvases half-finished, trusting time to complete them. Astronomers teach philosophy. Philosophers learn to calibrate telescopes. The walls between disciplines have dissolved like old atmospheres, replaced by shared wonder. One evening, walking home after the pause, you stop by a river reflecting the thin crescent of the moon. The water carries a faint tremor that matches your pulse. You remember the story your grandparents told: the emerald comet, the red planet, the sudden chorus of silence. It feels mythic now, almost impossible, yet undeniable. The world changed because it listened. You kneel, place your hand in the current, and feel the pulse pass through you. Water, body, sky, one unbroken circuit. For a moment, you imagine the first astronomers who saw 3I Atlas blazing over Mars, their awe, their disbelief, their inability to name what they felt. You understand them now. Awe is not ignorance. It is comprehension widened to the edge of language. The human reflection is that widening made permanent. You look up. The constellations are the same as they've always been, but you see them differently. Not as myths painted across distance, but as neurons firing in a living brain too vast to imagine. Somewhere in that cosmic mind, the memory of 3I Atlas glows faintly, our shared experiment in awareness. When you close your eyes, the rhythm continues. The continuum beat hums through muscle and marrow. The same frequency connects oceans, hearts, and galaxies. The great silence, once terrifying, has become sanctuary. You realize that sleep itself is a kind of communion, the body's way of returning to universal tempo. And as drowsiness overtakes you, one thought lingers, soft as the afterglow of starlight. Perhaps the universe never intended to teach us anything. Perhaps it only wanted us to slow down enough to notice that we were already perfect participants in its song. The night deepens. The stars dim gently. The pulse remains. The reflection completes itself in silence. And now, as the last traces of thought drift toward rest, The sky resumes its slow conversation. The stars do not end. They only fade to let darkness speak. Breathe in the rhythm of oceans, of orbit, of memory. Breathe out the weight of wonder, the noise of needing answers. Somewhere beyond sight, 3i Atlas continues its patient arc, carrying our curiosity through the dark. Let it go, let it glow, sleep in its trail. The universe hums the same soft assurance through every atom. You belong, you are heard, you are home.